Greetings, listeners, and welcome aboard Trek to Trek with Bob and Eric.
Hey, folks.
We are covering Star Trek the movies. Well, the TOS movies now. We're moving on this week with Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And we are also joined by Mr. Brad Hansen.
Hello, everybody.
Hey,
it's nice to be back. I did the podcast for the Abrams movies, and I'm really excited to be talking about the movies that I like even more than the Abrams movies, the classic movies.
So I think what we can notice right away off of motion picture is it has a kind of a different look. We have new uniforms.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Eric, what's your favorite Star Trek uniforms?
It's got to be like the DS9 war uniforms, right? With the gray tops.
It's a later DS. It's the gray.
With the collar, with the collar. Sweater kind of look.
It's first contact on.
Yeah. These are my favorite uniforms, but I'm partial. I kind of came at this movie in a weird way. This was the first Star Trek thing I ever saw.
Oh, wow.
Was this movie. This movie was my first exposure. I might have been around like 10 years old, and it was at a family reunion, and everyone was tired from hanging out at the beach or something. I think we're in Florida or somewhere, and it was just on TV, and so everyone just started watching it, and I had no idea who any of these guys were or what their backstories were, and the movie still worked for me, which I think is amazing. Like the fact that it works even better if you're aware of the backstory, but I think you could get someone cold on this, and there's enough character that you kind of get that you can still watch it and infer the meaning and the relationships of their friendships. Like the beginning of the movie does a very good job showing you everyone's relationship to everybody else, particularly between Spock and Kirk and McCoy. And I loved it. I thought it was great, and I immediately started watching the other Star Trek movies. Then eventually came back and watched the TV shows. So I think it's because of that, I'm always going to have this nostalgic factor for these red uniforms. I also think they did a really good job of kind of hiding a bit of the extra poundage that the the cast would eventually get, even starting at this point. So I think that's something else. You know, if they were wearing like the motion picture outfits, that would not have been a pretty sight by the time you got to like Star Trek 6, you know? So I think that, plus they just have a regal, official air to them. One thing I love about this movie is the way that Nicholas Meyer kind of came in, and whether people agree with it or not, I like how it's more militaristic looking. It just feels more serious. It doesn't feel like people roaming around in space in space pajamas like they were in the last movie. They just look really purposeful and very colorful, and I just love them.
For the longest time, I think maybe I had like a crappy TV growing up. Bob will test this. For the longest time, I believed these uniforms were orange, and I've called them orange forever. And I'm realizing now it's just crappy TV when I was growing up.
Fair enough. But yeah, I noticed that as a fan of classic Captain Marvel, who has the tunic flap and the ringlets on his gauntlet. You know? I am a fan of these uniforms as well. They're a little Captain Marvel-esque.
I never even thought about that, but they're totally very similar, aren't they?
Yeah, because they're both based on a military kind of look.
Okay.
So I've always liked the flap and the look, and I never thought about it as a kid because these were all. But also, this was the first exposure to Star Trek I had.
Really?
Was watching Star Trek 2 on cable because gotta love cable when they would run crap to death.
Right.
And it would have been probably around 83.
So did you also feel similarly as I did, where you came in cold and you were still able to follow it and it still worked for you?
Yeah. No, I came in cold. I still liked it. I still thought it was cool space stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of imagery from that movie that's always stayed with me about Khan and the weird things that go into their ears.
Oh, yeah, the ears thing, man.
Yeah,
everyone remembers that.
Yeah, there's always stuff from the film that I do remember. And then I remember Star Trek 3 because of the comic book ads it used to have. I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it again later on cable.
Yeah.
But then after 3 is when I went back to watch the series in the mid-'80s. So, so yeah, it's a good jumping on point, even though I think it does have greater impact if you have some bearing on the characters before that. But
yes. Yeah.
Bob and Brett, a question for you.
Yeah.
Speaking of like our childhood experiences of being exposed to Star Trek, do you recall at the time what feelings or thoughts you had on the whole like Star Trek versus Star Wars thing? Did you prefer one over the other at the time?
Absolutely. I was a diehard Star Wars fan at that time, and honestly, it took a while for me to kind of grow up a bit and kind of appreciate Star Trek. And one of the reasons why I like Wrath of Khan is that it was very Star Wars-y. It's very in a way, it's very black and white. You know what I mean? It's not really a moral quandary. It's more of an action movie. It's more of your simple revenge-style thriller, and with epic space battles and fights. And it was a very easy... It was very easy for me to jump on board of this one. In fact, it took me a while to get on board the more headspacey Star Trek movies, especially the first one and the third one and the fifth one. Those took a while for me to even kind of enjoy because they weren't like Star Wars at all, you know?
Right.
Whereas even like, you know, Undiscovered Country, you got like space battles and stuff. And then the TV shows took me even longer to get into. But at the time, I was firmly a Star Wars fan. But I also liked at least this movie because it gave me enough of that. Oh, and the big orchestral score with the very bright, memorable motifs for each character. You know, like Khan has a theme and Kirk has a theme, and the same way in Star Wars, every character would have their own little motif of music that you would have. So it was very easy for me to like this movie as a Star Wars fan. But now I like Star Trek a bit more. I think it's just you get older. And you get a little more patience. You don't need to see space battles every 10 minutes to be entertained. And so now I probably like Star Trek a little bit more than Star Wars, I would say.
Oh, interesting. Sure. Yeah.
How about you, Bob? What was your...
Well, I mean, obviously I saw Star Wars first. I mean, it was you couldn't escape it in the early 80s when I started to have actual memories I can remember. But I remember seeing Empire in the theater. I remember seeing Star Wars on re-release in the theater. I remember being terrified of Return of the Jedi because of the Emperor. He scared me. And, hey, I was 6, guys. I was 6.
And Jabba the Hutt didn't scare you at all?
No.
Because that scared me.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't it was Jabba scared me.
Oh, all right. I think it's because the Emperor could do the lightning bolts and hurt Luke. And I identified with Luke so much, so I thought, this guy can really hurt Luke.
Okay, gotcha.
But anyway, yeah, Star Trek was just another space thing that I liked. I don't remember differentiating the two that much. I mean, I knew the difference, but I never went, I like this better than this.
For me, it was I had worn out Star Wars. At the time, there was only 3 Star Wars movies, and that was, I mean, look, there was, you know, the dumb Ewok movies and stuff like that. Droids, and then whatever. But like actual like space proper Star Wars movies, there's only 3. There's only so many times you can watch 3 movies over and over again. So around this time, then I saw Wrath of Khan, and I'm like, oh, here's another thing. It's like more Star Wars. Like that's all I wanted was more Star Wars. So at least for half of the movies, I really enjoyed them because of that. How about you though? Where were you on that kind of feelings at the time?
For me, it was I had growing up. I had 2 older brothers and a cousin who was really hung out with the family quite a bit, and they were all into Star Wars. So it was almost more of like a budding sibling rivalry thing that pushed me into Star Trek's corner when I was growing up. And so it wasn't until later in my adult years that I was able to admit that Star Wars was worth looking at. And actually, at this point in my life, I'd almost kind of say that I'm more of a fan of Star Wars than Star Trek right now, just because I really enjoyed the Clone Wars animated series, and you know, Rebels was kind of rough, but I'm kind of liking what Star Wars is doing right now. That's where I'm at.
Anyway, so Wrath of Khan.
Yes.
I gotta say, I mean, overall, this script is still probably my favorite of the movie scripts, and it opens, I think, really well with the Kobayashi Maru test, very famous now to Star Trek fans. It must have been weird to viewers at the time to see essentially our classic crew with this complete new character at the helm with no Kirk. You're like, what's going on? Who's this Saavik character?
Yeah. Now, Cheers, I forgot to look at this up before we did our podcast. When did Cheers start?
I want to say 80. It was 82 or 83. It was right around
this time.
But she didn't come in until I want to say 87. She replaced
You're
Shelley
right. You're right. Yep. Okay. So she was really an unknown actress pretty much at the time.
Yes. This was like her first thing.
Yeah. And one of the things.
The credit says introducing Kirstie Alley, and they only
use
that for
really?
Their first outing, right?
Yeah.
That's
well,
right.
at least for film, she might have done stage work, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think she's really great. I think that it's really hard to play a Vulcan well.
Yes.
And I think the reason is because we'll get into this in Star Trek 3, but spoilers, I think that I much prefer this Saavik than the Star Trek 3 Saavik because Robin Curtis plays it the way that I feel like a lot of people play Vulcans, which is just emotionless. And really the way that you play a Vulcan, and Nimoy had this down to an absolute T, is there are emotions, but they're kind of buried underneath the surface, but yet as an actor you still feel them. They still come through in just little bits, you know. And something it's something that I think that Kirstie Alley did really, really well. maybe a little bit too much. Maybe there's a little bit too emotions. We'll get to that later. But at least I feel like she has a soul.
Yeah.
And I care about her. And I just didn't really get that with Robin Curtis's tape.
You do get more of a sense that she is a true cadet.
Yes.
Whereas Robin Curtis does seem a little more assured.
Yep. Yeah.
I'll give you that. But anyway, in this scene, we don't know what's going on, but you're trying to take it at face value. The Kobayashi Maru, a ship that has a distress call. They're in the neutral zone, and they're advised not to break the treaty, but she goes in to rescue them anyway.
Also, the signs in the background advise you not to smoke.
I forgot about that.
There's the no smoking signs in the back. Yeah.
Because have we ever seen a Starfleet cadet light up?
Yeah.
But anyway, it all goes awry, and it's a big old trap, and everybody appears to die. And we do get one of the great Kirk entrances.
Oh, I love the shot.
Yeah.
The shot where he shows up, and then his lights turn on is just such a great hero's entrance for this Admiral Kirk. I absolutely love that part.
It's a much better entrance than what he got in Star Trek Motion Picture.
Also, if you watch the scene, Nimoy gets his ass lit on fire, man. Like you see him in a wide shot, and he's just sitting there, and the explosions go right. I mean, they're right there. Like, wow, I gotta give props for him for literally sitting through that and not like a good day on set.
Now, as I understand it, this scene was done, or at least the way it was done because Spock's death had been leaked.
Yes.
And so they thought, well, if we appear to kill him in the beginning, we'll knock it out. People will think, oh, it was some miscommunication. This is all it is. And then you're not prepared for the real.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant.
That was brilliant.
Super smart decision to do that.
And it's
then,
foreshadowing.
Yeah, and then the audience is kind of relaxed and they think they've dodged the bullet.
Yep.
But then, nope.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah,
no, it was handled really well. And just the idea of even seeing Kirk, however briefly, in the role of this now truly an admiral. He's not gallivanting away. I know timeline-wise, we're now 5 years, or at least, or more, past the events of Motion Picture and the second 5-year mission that I guess was supposed to be Phase 2. So that is supposed to help explain why we're now going to dwell on age. We now can embrace their age difference, the new uniforms, all that, if anyone cares.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people were clued in on that in 82, but it helps me now when I watch the movie.
Right.
So, but seeing him in this role of being essentially a teacher, and grading the student on their test, and I like how she's not happy with the test. Like, that wasn't a true test of my abilities,
right? Yeah.
And we already get that great scene with him and Spock as what is he says? Aren't you dead?
Yeah. Yep.
There's so many great exchanges with the characters here. I even love when Dr. McCoy's like, "You're not going to critique my performance."
Yeah. What
like,
about my performance?
Yeah, I'm not a drama critic.
I'm fine with the motion picture. It's its own unique, special thing that I'll always kind of enjoy for what it is. But one things that I do find missing from that I sorely miss is that sense of friendly, of space friends, of that friendly, easygoing camaraderie. And I understand that motion picture, there's a story reason why that isn't there, but it's not there. And I really miss that. And then when you go from that to this, they instantly, Kirk has the twinkle in his eye back, and they just feel this easygoing, fun chemistry that they all have back together again that we haven't really seen since, the show. I mean, maybe parts of the third season. I mean, it'd been a while since we kind of seen that, and it's really great to just have the space friends back.
We do feel by the end of Motion Picture you're seeing that again, but it takes the movie for them all to kind of get back together and get the old groove back and kind of find themselves again. And that could be arguably one of the arcs of that movie. But agreed, it's great that right out of the gate,
they got their groove back, and it's really nice.
There's so many great scenes, but then you get to that scene with Spock and Kirk. We find out it's Kirk's birthday, and he gets the book, which also plays in throughout the movie, Tale of Two Cities. And we know Nick Meyer really loves his literature.
Yep.
He's quoting a lot of stuff.
The only thing I noted from the Kobayashi Maru scene is how tiny the neutral zone is.
It does look kind of small, doesn't it?
It's like a Cadbury egg. It's the tiniest little thing. It's go around it.
Those are impressive graphics though for 1982.
Sure, fair enough.
But I know compared to what was the old graphic from TOS with the neutral zone, it looked like this sort of map barrier. It looks very huge, and then here it's just this bubble. Yeah, you're like, all right. And in theory, it would be like a bubble. I get it, but it should look like a bigger bubble.
Yeah.
Anyway, but no, I love the exchange with Spock and how he's wishing him happy birthday, and there's a good parallel I think between the Spock scene and then that great McCoy scene in his quarters.
But right before that, there's another little moment. Right away, I feel like you get a sense of acting gravitas with Shatner in this movie that's kind of new. You don't really get this kind of acting, and I understand a lot of it was just Nicholas Meyer running through take after take after take and kind of wearing him down. So the Shatnerisms aren't really there, and you just kind of see him literally getting to the point where he was kind of feeling old and tired. But man, it works really well. And even right off the bat, right when there's a call over the intercom with the Spock and Kirk scene, and it's like, Captain Spock, come to the bridge. We need you. And you just see this little kind of, it holds on Kirk during that, and you see this kind of wistful look off into space in Kirk's eyes. And so right away there's this depth to his performance. I don't think he's ever been better than he was in this movie. I think this is Shatner's all-time best performance.
Yeah, I could
maybe Star Trek 3 is up there too, but I mean, he is so good in this right off the bat.
Totally.
They're not just taking a paycheck and showing up and being happy for the work. Like, they're really putting it. They're really doing a great job here.
That's a very good point, because that through line about how much command means to Kirk.
Yeah,
it's in a lot of Star Trek, but it's really nailed right here.
Yeah, totally. And then the scene with McCoy is great. I love I love Kirk's quarters.
Kirk's quarters. I love that set.
I love it. It's so great. I would love to have an apartment that looks like that.
That is pretty great. I don't know, Eric. You're the big critic on or critic on all the different quarters the crew has had over the years. Where does this measure up for you?
I think the thing I noticed most about that was the background. If you look through the outside, I feel like the set that they built for his for the exterior there really resembled like a matte painting from one of the original series episodes.
It's not even a matte painting. It's a painting that's just hung up. And if you look closely on like a Blu-ray, if you have a big enough TV, you can see that there's actually like folds where it wasn't quite taut.
Yeah,
and it's kind of there. So I just tried to look at it when I'm watching the movie.
That is fantastic.
That happens a lot with Star Trek 3 too, where they just hang things behind, and you could tell it's just kind of, don't look too closely at the backdrop. You'll see little folds, not quite perfect.
Right.
But to be fair, this is a low budget movie. I mean, just for comparison, the original the first movie was $45 million. This movie was 11. So they did this movie for 1/4 of the budget of the last movie, and wow, were they smart with their money.
Very smart.
So the way I look at this movie, I kind of look at it a bit different. I kind of give it a lot of forgiveness, like I do with like old Doctor Who episodes. Like, there might be little cheap folds in the backgrounds from here and there, and a couple effect shots might look a little dodgy, or like the scene we're talking about where he's talking with Spock. If you look at the staircase underneath, it's all beat up. And it's like, there's all these little things where you can look at, but it's like, they only had $11 million. Like, you know what I mean? That was not much money back then.
They made it work enough where it doesn't really harm the enjoyment of the movie.
Exactly. There's little things, but they put their money, they really were very careful and smart with how they put their money. And a lot of that has to go with their new producer, Harv Bennett, who was a TV producer. He came on, and back in those days, that was not something that happened very often. You had your TV and movies were very separate. Nowadays, they're kind of intermingling because of new media, but back then, you were either a TV producer or your movie producer.
Right.
And it was very smart of Paramount to hire Bennett, because he was a very, very smart, in a way they had to work with the TV budget to make this work. And man, were they smart. And that's why you even see like recycled footage from the first movie. Yeah, who cares? You know, and it all works really well. They were really, really smart with their money, and I always revel at this movie at working so well with so little.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they knew it had to. It's almost like Doctor Who in a way. They knew that it had to ride more on the writing and the performance and the characters than spectacle. And it does have good spectacle. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the same kind of showy, offy spectacle they were trying to do in motion picture.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Or the Abrams movies, for that matter.
Yeah. So, but I love the McCoy scene. Because not only are these, I feel like the gifts are almost aimed at his age, like the glasses, and all that. And then we have that great bit where McCoy basically tells him that, why are we treating your birthday like a funeral, and you better get your command back before you really become one of these relics.
Love it. Yeah.
And it's
also, I love McCoy's outfit.
McCoy always has great outfits.
I love it. I love this one. Yeah.
It's great.
Cool. No, I love that.
And we get our first Romulan ale is illegal joke, which shows up, in countless other episodes.
Is this the first time?
I feel like it is.
I think it is.
Yeah, you guys have been going through the original series.
I'm pretty sure it is. I don't remember the Romulan ale thing and TOS being the whole, it's illegal. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm sure there's some Trekkie listening who's screaming at us, but...
Right. So, to just jump ahead a little bit, I'm curious, because you guys have been going through original series, the whole Chekov problem of the next scene or two.
Yeah.
How does that work with you guys? The fact that Chekov is appearing and Khan knows who Chekov is, even though Chekov was not in the original
Season 1.
Yeah, Space Seed. He wasn't in there yet.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about that?
I know my answer. Eric, how do you feel?
I'm tremendously forgiving with a lot of stuff.
Continuity.
Special effects will bother me more than storyline or continuity issues. So,
okay.
And I think the fact that I saw this movie long before I actually watched the original series kind of cemented it in my mind that Chekov and knew this guy. So what,
Yeah.
So for me, it's very passable. It doesn't bother me at all.
Mm-hmm. So you don't even have to fill it in with Chekov was on the ship, we just didn't see him.
Yeah, he wasn't on the bridge yet. He wasn't part of the bridge crew yet. He was.
So maybe Khan ran past him in a corridor. And
the thing is I usually try to fill in the gaps like that, but even this seems so insignificant that it's just like I can that's fine.
Yeah,
no, I brush over it. It's not a deal.
I'm willing to mostly go with that. I'll tell you, there is actually for what it's worth, I'll tell it. There is actually a plug that an author did in one of the books, and if you want to hear this,
I would love to know. Yeah.
So this guy wrote the 2-part Rise of Khan Noonien Singh books. Have you read those, Eric?
No.
I'd recommend them. They're fun.
Yeah.
So he also merges the whole Gary 7 thing from Assignment Earth. So it's actually part Gary 7 story and part Khan story, if that makes any sense. Anyway, so what happens is that while Khan is rising to power in the 80s, and he ends up stealing a bunch of government documents, he finds out about the Enterprise's time travel trip in part 4 when the Russians when the Americans had Chekov captured, and they had his face on file as being part of the Enterprise, and that's where he remembered his face.
Wow,
that is brilliant.
That's a total pretzel logic to fix a plot hole that only a couple nerds would have even noticed.
So there you go. And I like it. I don't always go with it, but sometimes sometimes it tickles me, and other times he was on the ship. Whatever. It's not a big thing, but
nope.
So something along that very same avenue. Commander Kyle on the Reliant was the transporter room officer from the Enterprise, right?
Oh. So one of the guys on the Reliant, you're saying?
Yeah, is Kyle, the punching bag officer who gets hit every time someone uses the transporter. So I'm wondering, and he who also got hit by Khan in that episode. So if Khan's not forgetting faces and he transports the crew down to the down to the surface, there's not forgetting faces.
There's a cut
scene,
I get you once? Where he recognizes Kyle too, and then punches him and throws him down. I love it. All right, so yes, I actually, I always thought the City Alpha 5,
6. This is City Alpha 5. They think it's 6.
They think it's 6. It's 5.
Yeah.
I always loved
this is City Alpha 5.
Yes,
yeah.
I always loved the idea that this the effect they used for the wind. I know, and I saw the behind the scenes of how they did that, which I thought was pretty clever.
Well, how'd they do that?
Well, I mean, it was all old fashioned movie making.
They're just big fans.
Wind, yeah. And they did. I love the fact we get to see spacesuits. I like seeing spacesuits.
Oh yeah, yep.
I always do wonder if the handles on the spacesuits on the chest have any significant function beyond Khan.
If someone floats away,
you grab them. But yeah, that whole bit where they're discovering the hideout of Khan and his cronies and stuff in the Botany Bay.
Botany Bay.
Yeah. That whole scene is another. Oh God, Ricardo Montalban's so good.
He is great. I mean, okay, so as you might remember from Into Darkness. Not a fan of Into Darkness. Yeah. There's one great thing about Into Darkness. Into Darkness makes me love this movie even more. because this movie it was my first Star Trek, and it just is so effortless. Everything works so well, and the movie doesn't even seem like it's trying hard to do everything so well. Like it's just a great movie, And then you watch Into Darkness, and you see these same kinds of scenes, these same kinds of characters, and they just all fall flat. And it's like, it makes you appreciate how bad this movie could have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they just would have tweaked it a little bit, like, if they would have had someone who wasn't Ricardo Montalban play Khan, or if the death scene at the end was played differently or whatever, like all the things that Star Trek Into Darkness did to try to evoke this movie, and didn't really make it work. It just makes me love this movie even more because I'm just like, wow, like Ricardo Montalban, I always took for granted as Khan because no one else was Khan. But now I'm like, wow, he's the man. He has this kind of big theatrical air that just works so well, particularly against an actor like Shatner, who is also very big in theatrical, and it's just he's just such a good villain, and I think he does a great job of building on the Khan who we saw in Space Seed, even just how he looks so badass with that long silver hair. But I think makes him such a great villain is that generally speaking, your Star Trek villains tend to be one of two guys. They tend to be the smart, older but not really physically scary bad guy, or they tend to be kind of just a big dumb Klingon, or a heavy without very smarts. And what I think makes him so fascinating is that he's smart and he's older and he's wiser and he's just physically a Superman, but he also knows Kirk, and he also already knows Kirk and everything. And he's just if you have to stack the deck against your hero, which is what you're supposed to do in good writing and good storytelling, they did a great job with Khan. Like, he is such a great villain, and even better in this, I think, than he was in Space Seed.
Oh, yeah. And Space Seed's a fantastic episode. Weren't they considering a sequel to a couple of other episodes, and they eventually ended up deciding they hadn't... This wasn't like a foregone conclusion.
No, it was Bennett going back. Bennett wasn't super familiar with Star Trek.
Yeah.
And so he went back through, and he just kind of latched on to this episode.
Right,
and was thinking, wow, well, simple, easy, effective. I think he wasn't thinking in terms of Roddenberry, which is more, for better or for worse, Roddenberry was looking at how we make a movie. Oh, let's make it like, kind of a space age, kind of head trippy kind of thing. And I think Bennett was looking at what would make a good, proper, action-y kind of story. And I think it was very, very smart of him to look at that one and be like, oh yeah, let's just follow this up,
And it just so happened Montalban was still big on Fantasy Island.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah. And reading Shatner's autobiography, he talked to Montalban about doing this part, and he was having big problems where he was reading the script in his Fantasy Island,
Mr. Rourke.
Yeah, Mr. Rourke's voice, and he was kind of scared. Montalban was. He was like, "Oh my God, I've been playing this part for so long on TV that I've forgotten who Khan was." So then he asked for a reel of the old Space Seed and kind of watched it a bunch of times and read the script, and he just kind of decided, well, it kind of came back to him in a way. And wow, did it come back! He's one of the screen, not just Star Trek. I think he's one of screen's all-time best villains.
Yeah, he's always great.
So fun to watch every time I watch this movie.
Eric, I know you were a fan of Space Seed. How did you feel Montalban came back to the part here?
I enjoyed Space Seed and I enjoyed Wrath of Khan, but in my mind, I don't really connect the two Khans. Like, really? I feel like enough time had passed between 67 and 82 or whatever for his vast intelligence and his strength. There's not much else there that makes Khan overly interesting, other than he's just this like force for revenge, or this lust for power. He represents these forces, but there's like not much there in the way of a personality per se.
So he's a little thin for you, in other words.
Yeah, it's kind of like a force of nature. He's like he's Dante's Peak or Tornado.
He's the tornado in Twister.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So you didn't like Ricardo Montalban's performance? You didn't find menace,
or is it just that the story you don't think really gave him as much?
I guess I'm referring to the character of Khan itself. So yeah, Montalban did awesome, and Khan is definitely a menace, but. I don't. What's his favorite color? What does he like to eat? What does he do on Saturday night?
I don't need all that.
Let's not Phantom Menace this, okay? All right. We don't need to know this.
Yeah, it's like
we had just enough.
Yeah, to me, in my opinion, it's like the Joker in The Dark Knight. Yeah. I don't need to know all that stuff. One thing I do think is kind of neat is that I do agree with you. He does seem very different here than he does in Space Seed, but I think a lot of that is because here's a Khan who actually fell in love.
True.
He fell in love and she died. And what would that do to a guy? And I like how he has a little bit of a screw loose in this movie. You know what I mean? Like that drove him kind of insane.
And he's had to and what is it? He killed 20 of his people, so he's lost 20 of his people.
Yep.
Some of them I've got to assume are close. His wife, who I think we all know as Marla McGivers from Space Seed, which was nice that she even got.
Yeah, I love that. Yes.
So if you're a fan, you get it, but it's not doesn't ruin it if you've only seen the movie. They're not referring to some character name you don't know.
Yep. I guess I don't have the same problem you, Eric, because this movie it's less of a character study and more of a straightforward kind of revenge thriller in space. So, but I do understand what you're saying.
But I think as you just said, especially when you factor in Space Seed and what he had to go through to survive for 15 years on this planet with the harsh conditions and losing so many close people, it factors pretty well. And to me, the crux of it, and this is something I didn't get as much as a kid because you're not looking for nuances, but the thing that I love is how he really is driven by this revenge of Kirk, and you get that right away when Terrell says, "I've never met Admiral Kirk," and he just goes, "Admiral," and you see that look in his face, just that sense of Kirk has gone on to do all this other stuff, and I've been stuck here.
Ooh, yeah. Ooh, that's interesting.
And to me, that says everything about his character.
That's interesting. Yeah,
less is more. Sure. It should be less is more.
It is. Yeah.
So I don't know if you got that, Eric, but that's where it always comes from for me.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting read. I mean, I kind of was harping on this in the Abrams movies, but to me, good sci-fi rewards you for the more you think about it, and bad sci-fi is like, don't think about this too hard, doesn't make any sense. And I think this movie is a brilliant example of things like what you were just saying. You can, part of the reason I must have seen this movie 100 times, no joke. I mean, I don't know. Actually, I'd say, how many times have you seen this movie, if you had to guess?
Oh my God. I mean,
it's got to be at least 50 or 60 for me.
I'll go like 70. It's between 50 and 100. I'll go 70.
Smokes.
I'm not sure. It's a lot.
How about you, Eric?
I'm going to go with like 4 or 5.
Yeah, rookie.
He's a TNG guy.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, he'll get there. Yeah. But one of the reasons I find I can watch it again and again is little moments like that. Every time I watch it, I catch just something that makes it even work better.
Sure. Or I find myself like I was looking at the bit where he lifts Chekov, which I always liked as a kid, and I think it's a very good quick demonstration of how powerful physically he is. But I always look at it going like, I don't see wires. How did they do that?
And a box?
Was there a box?
No, there's a box. You can actually see when he lets go of Chekov. You can kind of see. Look at Chekov's like feet, who are right below frame. You can sort of see that he sort of like skips off the box a little bit.
Okay.
And once you see it, you can never unsee it. And I think you can even almost hear.
Thanks.
It's like one of those Apple. What do they call them? Apple crates. You know that they have there.
All right. I knew there had to be a trick. You're not going to ask an actor to do that take after take.
Yeah. And that's all it was. But simple. Hey, you know what?
Simple.
You don't got budget for wires or anything like that. You got to make it work.
Yep.
Which works great.
And of course I got to talk about the weird gnarly. What they don't even name these things. The weird little things that go in their ears.
Oh, they have a name in Star Trek lore. I'll look it up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but that freaked me out as a kid. I still find it really unsettling.
Yeah, my wife gets freaked out by those things.
Oh,
like the
God.
ears.
The ears. They go into your ears and
them out.
And when I watch it, I mean, you're just and I love how it's memorable, and it's a great device to get them to be sort of brainwashed. But I remember every time I saw this more as an adult, and I was really thinking about it, I kept going, that should really mess with, because I know Chekov goes on in other movies, and I'm like, that should really damage you, like that. Like, how do you cure yourself from a weird, I was trying to remember how they undo it, and we'll get there later. But I always thought the solution
SETI eel is what they call. Yeah, they're not actually referenced in that particular movie, but I think they're referenced. So the thing
I noticed from this scene was the checkerboard this time around. I think that symbolically plays in later in the space battle, where they're talking about how Khan has this two-dimensional thinking.
Oh, wow. I never connected the two, because they would play Star Trek chess, which is 3D-dimensional.
Chess. But
see, great sci-fi. The more you think about it.
But Khan was from the 20th century. Khan's from the 20th century. He's from 1996, so they would have a classic chessboard. Yeah.
That's great. Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, nice little detail. Nice catch.
All right.
About that. Yeah.
It just went up another point.
It did. It's an 11 now for me.
And I even like how the scene ends where he's like, now tell me, where is James Kirk? And then we cut right to Kirk, and he's got the glasses on and the shuttle. He does not look prepared to take on Khan at all.
And I love how the music, the music in this one. Let's just talk about James Horner and how good this is one of the, in my opinion, one of the all-time greatest movie scores of all time. And the first motion picture score by Jerry Goldsmith is fantastic. And James Horner was kind of a no-name back then. He was not. He was a good, solid working guy. But this score, I mean, wow, they really got their money's worth out of this kid. And I mean, wow, his score is so good. And I love the little, and a lot of people forget. I didn't realize this until I went back later on. But to me, this was the Star Trek theme.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? All those little. But it's not. It was just for him. It was his score, but it works so well, and it identifies so well with those characters, and the Khan's theme and Kirk's theme, and later on. I love the shot where you see the planet, and then you see the Reliant, and then you kind of they pan up from the Reliant and the bottom of the planet, and then you hear the music, and you see the planet, and then you see the Enterprise. Or no, it's right, it's the other way around, and you hear the music change from the Star Trek, Kirk's theme to Khan's theme, and it's like, oh, it's so good. I love this score. I must have listened to this score as a kid hundreds and hundreds of times.
Oh,
it works so well.
It's a great score, great CD.
Yeah.
I was thinking, even in the moment we're talking about, we have that great menace, that slow build Khan music, and then it cuts that nice light little music, as he they're about to board. It's such a change in tone, but
great.
It's really good both for character and for getting you out of that scene. It's like, okay, now we're
the
back
music
to this.
adds $5 million to the budget. In your mind, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Think about this, because not only do you see like literally they're reusing shots from the motion picture of especially the Enterprise leaving
all of that space dock stuff.
Feels totally different with the different music and the the quicker pacing ending, and then the idea that the Reliant set is just a redress, very basic, of the Enterprise set, but because most of the time we hear Khan's music over that. Versus the the more heroic music over the Enterprise, they feel like two different sets. Like the music really adds, it plays in this part of hiding the limited budget very, very well.
I was also
lighting too.
Yeah, lighting was good too.
I was also thinking about how so as a kid, not understanding and reading up about Trek lore and timelines and stuff, once I saw 1 and I rewatched 2, this would have probably been around 89 or 90. I remember being very confused, because this idea that if 1 and 2 happened relatively close together, as I assumed as a kid watching these movies, because 2, 3, and 4 are almost connected. It completely was weird to me that we have an Admiral Kirk coming back on duty and taking over the Enterprise with a new crew and a refit in 1, and suddenly it's like the same thing is happening in 2, where he's an Admiral Kirk going for an inspection,
right,
and kind of ends up taking over the
only ship in the quadrant. And
I'm going like, wait a minute, what? And like, how did this just happen again? Didn't he take over? And then you have to go, okay, there's a larger gap of time that supposedly happens here. Okay. And if you're going to do it, the scene, although I like the scene with him and Decker, him taking over from Spock makes way more sense. And
I actually,
way better than the scene with Decker.
What picked me up on this time was I love how Kirk goes into this one like he's actually hesitant. He's like, no, I'm here as an advisor. You this is your ship now, Spock. Yeah. Like, I don't want to interfere. And then Spock is like, bullshit. Like this is your first best destiny. Like, you're gonna be the guy. Like, come on, dude. Like, I love how Spock has no ego to bruise, and he gives him the command. And also, it would have been so boring dramatically to go through that same fight for power that was in the first movie. And I love how they have one scene which not only gets through that really quick, but also sets up the friendship between Kirk and Spock, because good friends, you don't have to bullshit each other. And I love how they just cut through each other's bullshit right away, and now he's basically the acting captain, and off we go, and it works so well. And I love that crazy mirror thingy, by the way, that Spock has in his that infinity mirror that he has in his quarters is really great.
And the chimes. I got all right. So we're here at this scene now. Eric, I have to ask, because Eric, by the way, loves Spock's quarters in the series. That's like his favorite quarters set.
Okay.
So how do you feel Spock's quarters measure up in Star Trek 2?
Well, they're good here. The original series is better because the original series looks like a Oriental Trading Company junk shop, right? Full of, like, all of this like brass crap, like little candle holders and Buddha statues and stuff. Like it's very groovy, right? You know, with like these scarlet curtains and things.
Yeah. This seems more like a meditation chamber.
Yes.
Right. So it's still great. And by the way, Bob, we still have not seen McCoy's quarters, so I'm pretty sure he still doesn't have any.
Yeah, he has a theory that McCoy doesn't have any quarters.
He just lives in the sick bay and just like falls asleep. Oh, the bed's there. So as long as there's weren't too many injuries, he just pulls one up. The sound of that bump, just kind of helps him go to sleep.
Although I have told him we have seen McCoy's quarters, but he doesn't believe. Yeah, man trap.
Oh wow, yeah. They're kind of just I'll
have to go back. That might have been like just a corner of sick bay. But we'll take it.
It's just right there. Yeah. By the way, the scene before this where Saavik takes the ship out of space dock.
Good little bit. Yeah.
I don't understand what's so hard about that. Can someone fill me in? Because everyone's treating it. Even McCoy gets like bug eyes. Like, oh my god, she's gonna take the ship out of space dock, and all she does is say, quarter impulse power, and then the ship moves forward. Like, what was so hard about that?
I know I think it's the idea that putting a fresh cadet in charge of anything was like
this is one of those things where I get the beat and why they did it, but I do think that they had more of a budget and it was actually shown to be a complicated maneuver. Like I think in Starship Troopers there's a similar maneuver that they do, and you kind of get a little bit and you're like, oh yeah, that looks hard.
I know what you wanted to see, and this is what they should have done. They should have had her take over Sulu's post and have her actually do whatever the hell Sulu was doing,
right?
And then it would have probably played a little bit more.
Right. It's just she literally says quarter impulse power, and that's it. And it's like, all right, it's not that hard. But
even though I love him offering Kirk a tranquilizer, that was a nice little bit. So yes, we have them on their way. We find out about was it Regular One?
Regular One space station. Yep.
And we find out, we get a little quick introduction on Carol Marcus and David, and we think we find out right in the first scene that David is Kirk's son, right? No. We find out that she is an ex of Kirk's. We don't know that David's his son yet.
Yeah. But we find out when Kirk finds out?
Yeah, we pretty much find out when Kirk finds out. But we do find out right away that she's an ex of Kirk. She's one of Kirk's ex-flings.
But one we haven't seen in the original series. But one we never saw in the series. And by the way, I should mention that when I actually went back and watched the original series, well after watching this movie, I kept on waiting for Carol Marcus to pop up, and I was kind of disappointed that she didn't. And part of me does wonder, did they miss an opportunity to maybe get one of those X's from from the original series, because he did have meaningful. There were like at least 2 or 3 that you probably could have.
The problem is the big ones don't fit what they also needed in terms of what she had to do in the story.
Oh yeah, she needed to be a scientist. Yeah, that's a good point.
And think about like sitting on the edge of forever. Well, she dies. And think about Paradise Syndrome.
She dies. Fair enough. But there were plenty of like casual flings.
There was possibly like Dr. Helen Noel from Dagger of the Mind, but that wasn't the strongest. But you could have.
You could have. Yeah.
It's harder though, because also they tended to be more like alien babe of the week than another member of Starfleet.
Fair enough. So timeline wise, when did the relationship with Carol Marcus happen?
I did the math on
I was hoping you would, Eric. I'm so happy. Okay, let's hear it.
Because their character ages, I think, reflect, and the time that has passed.
Yeah.
Reflects actually 5 years have passed. So here's the deal. David is 22, Carol is 40, and Kirk is 51.
Okay.
Which means Kirk at 29 impregnated Carol at 18.
Okay.
And this would have been five years before the original series.
Before the original series?
Yeah, because of David's age. Yeah, that makes sense.
Wow. I'm glad that we're doing this math, because in my head this always happened after the original series.
No. I knew it had to be early original series or just before because of David's age.
Right. Cool. Wow. Neat. Okay. It's good thing to think about.
Kirk on the way up the ranks.
I thought it was interesting that the Marcuses were civilian scientists, and I really appreciated their how they talked about the military and the military objectives and what the military wants, and kind of brought in that tension between the science community and the military community, which is kind of a real thing what you have now. So it's kind of cool to see that mirrored, or see what that looked like in the 22nd or 23rd century or whatever.
Right. That's still kind of a something that they grapple with, or at least feared would happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So yeah, no, at least we set that up, and we also get the seeds of the Genesis thing, which I have to say is probably one of the coolest movie MacGuffins we've ever had.
The Genesis itself.
The Genesis itself is really
device.
The MacGuffin. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really cool. I agree.
It's a great idea.
It's not just a random thing. It's not the rabbit's foot in Mission Impossible 3.
Oh, God.
This thing that you have, and it looks cool. And honestly, you could obviously the sequels wouldn't have worked, but you could have made this movie work with just a MacGuffin that you never find out what it is.
Could have.
It could have worked okay.
It needed to be something destructive, but other than that, yeah.
Yeah, but if you just say it's a super bomb or whatever, I think it's neat that it is this like proper sci-fi device, and those cool, for the day, really impressive CG animation that they use, and the way the camera sweeps around is really they really got their money's worth of that clip. I think we see that in both of the sequels to the movie. They're using that footage, and everything like that. That's really cool. I think it's really, really neat. And
it leads that whole exposition scene with a great graphic, which again, good exposition gives you a visual. It leads to one of the a nice little Kirk, Spock, McCoy argument like you get in the old show.
Yes,
and that's pretty great, you know. And I assumed Eric, you would have been a fan of that scene in particular.
You know, McCoy's I like the whole the "calm yourself, doctor" line from the next movie. Like,
right.
Kirk needs to have used that more throughout his relationship with McCoy, I think.
Jeez, man. Come on. All right. I love it.
Come on, guy doesn't have quarters. Give him a break.
He likes to drink his brandy too much.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah, it's okay.
I assumed you also would have approved with the fact that one of his gifts to him was the Romulan ale, because he also thinks McCoy's a drunk, by the way.
I think he has to. He has a tough job.
I also appreciate the doctor bringing the drinks to the captain as a kind of a throwback to the pilot episode. That seems
wow! I never even thought about that.
Yeah,
very, very cool. Yeah, that is pretty neat. And there is a nice callback in I did like Star Trek Beyond, where they have a similar drinking scene between Kirk and the Doctor. I really like that too.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Always good to have that.
Yeah. No, it's another good character beat that, I mean, for fans of the series, it's like, oh yeah, it just feels so familiar. But even if you're not, it helps set up that trio so you make sense what happens later with the three of them.
No, in my opinion, there's not a wasted minute in this movie.
That's the thing.
Everything. Right. Now, have we talked about the director's cut? And by the way, Eric, have you seen the director's cut of this film?
Actually, I think that is what I watched with this one.
Okay.
Even though we were supposed to be doing theatrical versions, I think that's, by the time I was through it, I was like, I think this is the director cut.
To be fair, they're not massively different movies. Like, I actually look at like the director's cut of Motion Picture as to be a very different experience than the than the regular cut. This movie, there's like just, they use a couple alternate takes of stuff. There's a couple more lengthened scenes than cut, I would say. And in general, I find myself, I don't know, Bob, do you have an opinion between the two? Which one you might favor?
It's so subtly different. I like knowing for sure that cadet was Scotty's nephew.
Yeah, that's one of the things that to me makes the strongest argument for the director's cut. I don't know why you wouldn't have that there.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the theatrical cut is just so nice and tight.
Yeah, exactly. If anything, the pacing of the director's cut feels a little slow. Yeah. A lot of times they're talking about things that are pretty obvious, and they're kind of just spelling them out. There's a lot more conversations between McCoy and Kirk in particular, where they're mostly just kind of rehashing what we kind of already know.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm kind of either way. It's not. It only adds, I think, like a couple minutes of the runtime, so it doesn't like ruin it. It's not like a James Cameron director's cut that adds like 10 or 15 minutes to it.
Right. It's a tweak. It's not like a massive
The nephew thing is the thing that, to me, is the biggest selling point of the director's cut.
Yeah. That's the only part that I go, why even cut that? That adds so little, and it adds a nice punch for Scotty. Why not keep it in? But
yeah, exactly. But
I know a lot of, or at least some fans that I've read online were upset that Scotty would go through the effort of bringing up the body of the bridge.
Yeah. Later on,
when he should be fixing the ship, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah. Or why not take him to sickbay? Why take him to the bridge? And the answer is, it's a dramatic moment. It does work as such, but that always has bugged me.
That's a slight. I'll give you that. It's a niggle. It doesn't ruin, but I give you.
It's like, where is he going? And my only explanation is that Scotty's a pretty emotional person.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to show. Maybe he was so bereft of.
and the fact that it's his nephew. It's not just
I can't also remember. Was McCoy on the bridge during that space battle? I don't think he was.
I don't think he was.
So, okay, I was going to say maybe if McCoy was in the bridge, that would kind of give him an out.
There's another thing in there, too, where later after the attack, and they're going to go check out Regular One, they're, Kirk and, Saavik are going to go, and he wants somebody else, and McCoy says, well, I can spare me. And I thought about it going, well, I see why McCoy's there. They could be hurt. You don't know what's going on. Yes, you want a medical guy over there, but there clearly are a lot of wounded. We just a scene or two ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
so you'd think that McCoy would have his hands full with all the casualties, but I thought, well, if it isn't McCoy, you would at least send over some medical guy to check and make sure they're good. A chapel or somebody. So might as well make it a character we know and love. So all right, exactly. It's a niggle, but all right.
So can we talk about the first space battle between the Reliant and Kirk?
Because it comes right off of that learning about Genesis.
Yeah, it moves. I mean, this movie moves really well. The pace is so good. That's what I was saying earlier. Like you really can't cut much out of it between losing a character beat or the theme of the movie and how well it builds on the theme and the structure. It really is it's pretty much a perfect script. Pretty close.
So Eric, you're a big fan of your spaceships and space battles and Star Trek. I know how much you go on about the Deep Space Nine space battles. How did the Star Trek 2 space battles work for you?
Well, I can't praise this movie enough when it comes to that. The shots of both of the ships in the 2 or 3 battles that they have are just fantastic. You know, space feels big. The ships feel big. Yeah. The damage that they're doing to each other feels big. Things are blowing up. Pieces are flying all over the place. Everything's gorgeous. Everything is from a really interesting dynamic angle. There's nothing dull about any of those space battles. Like a couple shots that just spring to mind is when the Reliant is heading towards the Enterprise near the end of that first battle and just barely passes overhead, and the music's so intense and whoa, there's a lot of this ships coming up from behind other ships, so there's like kind of surprises and sneaking around. It was the battle / effects in this movie are just delightful.
They've really aged well, I think. Even near the end, I've always appreciated when they go into the nebula. And back then, the amount of time and effort and coordination it would take to get the flashes of the nebula lightning or whatever to line up and pair exactly with the flashes of lightning on the Enterprise, even those are like, we're talking like 8 or 10 layers of film that were optically composited, and the thought and care and effort, but how well that makes it look like that ship is in that space, even though they weren't. Is just it blows my mind how much time and effort they put into it, and there aren't that many space shots in this one. There's a lot more in like Search for Spock. The added budget for the Search for Spock, which added 50% to the budget, went to the space shots. But on this one, I think they really paid it. It's kind of like an anime series where there's a lot of static, and they save their money for those couple dozen really memorable money shots, and then they just blow shit up and it looks so good. I agree. The sense of weightiness of these two big battle cruisers. They're not X-Wings versus TIE fighters. These are big, lumbering. They take a long time to turn and dive and move. And I think the idea that Nicholas Meyer, the director, really understood was like, these are like, it's Horatio Hornblower in space. These are big ships, and these are like cannons firing at each other, and it lends itself really well to Star Trek.
This is where the grandness of that music supports that. Like the music is as big as the ships.
Totally. Yeah.
It's my favorite cue on the score.
Which one? Which particular one?
When the Reliant comes dun 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 dun.
And you first see it, and you're like, well, it's great because it's setting up the promise that the earlier scenes have set up of that you're going to see Kirk and Khan. They're finally gonna meet, and so when you finally see them and they're in the same space together, it's such a tense moment. One thing, if I were to criticize this, is I don't understand why Kirk takes so long to raise his damn shields. Like there's like 3 or 4 things that are happening. Like they scan and they they caught them in a lie that their ship's
But by the time they catch them in the lie, it's like already it's just
no. But then there's another thing of like, well, their shield, they're powering up their phasers. Kirk's a little slow on the draw to raise his shields at the very least. But
Khan says it himself. We're one big happy Federation. But
it's a minor bugaboo I have that Kirk seems to not raise. Like, why can't you just raise your shields? What's so hard about raising your damn shields just to be safe?
I understand what you're saying. I have never had a problem with that in this sequence.
It's only because I feel like the movie in general is very good about getting that kind of strategy of the captains down. Yeah. And in general, it's really good. And this is that one part, like, he's kind of irks me, or it's like, why is he doing that kind of thing? But I don't know. Did you have a thought on that, Eric?
I was just going to say, I think for me, where I get frustrated is this in the next film where they're approaching Genesis, and there's a cloaked Klingon ship out there. In the second movie, Kirk says, "I got caught with my pants down." Well, almost the exact same thing happens in the following film. So I was frustrated that he didn't learn his lesson, because the next film happens about 3 days later.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Keep your shields up, Kirk. Just as a matter of policy, just leave them up.
Yeah, just do it.
But yeah, and that's the other thing you actually make a point, is that usually when we saw space battles in Star Trek, it was usually with the Klingons, maybe the Romulans. This is really the first time we're seeing a Federation ship fighting a Federation ship.
Yeah, and it's cool how they're kind of evenly matched. I think has always been really kind of neat to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love these space battles. I agree. I think they're really magnificent, well done.
On a note where once Khan has taken over the Reliant, which interesting, I always forget how in this film. And you figure it out pretty well between inference of dialogue and so forth, but they do skip over Khan basically having to, and it would have been laborious, I get it, beaming up and taking over the Reliant, having that crew being forced to beam down, getting to Regular One, and then torturing them, and then getting back in time. Like, they managed to skip over all that, infer it, and you can pretty much fill it in, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
But the one other thing I caught this time around when I was watching it is, you see how the crew, all of Khan's people, are all kind of wearing bits of the Starfleet uniforms, like little jacket over the shoulder and stuff. And I noticed that Khan had in his necklace, he's got a giant Federation symbol, and it took me a minute to go, where did he get that? And then I'm like, that's the belt buckle from a uniform.
Is it really?
It looks like a damaged belt buckle, because if you look at the belt buckles, it's a giant circle around the Federation.
Wow.
And I'm like,
but it's got that kind of, the corners kind of nicked out.
Yeah, but it's clearly damaged because he probably killed the guy in some horrible phaser fashion. So I just thought he took some poor bastard's belt buckle and thought, I'm going to put that on my neck. And
that's great.
I just thought it was a cool detail.
That's really cool detail. So. Yeah. By the way,
Commander Kyle's buckle.
Commander Kyle's buckle. It's canon. Anyway, so I was going to say that, but my favorite part of certainly the first sequence, but both of them, as we said, we see the thinking going on between these two guys, and especially Kirk, and how they caught me with my pants down, and then having to outthink to strike back and do the prefix code and trick Khan and have that whole conversation, because that reminds me a lot of Corbomite Maneuver, where he has to bluff the alien, and that was one of my favorite Kirk moments in the series, and I always liked that. I like seeing the strategy beyond just the pew pew, so
fire everything. It's much better to see the tactical thoughts. I love that. I agree.
And just their little exchanges where Spock's going like, the prefix code, it's our only play, and he's like, well, assuming he hasn't changed it, and they're just like, ooh. So there's even still risk at what they're doing now, that if that didn't work, they probably would have been done. So those moments too, where he has to, and then he has to put the glasses on for a second, like, damn, like it's like this extra acknowledgement that he's older, but he's
But see, the funny thing about that is that when he puts on the glasses, from a modern day contemporary perspective, it's like, he's old, he's wearing glasses. But you gotta think, those are 400-year-old glasses. They'd be the equivalent if you're out and like someone put on some like if they couldn't hear, and they grab one of those, those, the end of the record players they used to have, and they stuck them in your ear, you'd be like, what in the hell is that? You wouldn't be thinking, wow, they're really old. You'd be like, what is that?
Yeah. I know, you have a point. In theory, I'm sure LASIK or some future version of LASIK everyone must just do it, right?
Well, they say, McCoy says it's retinox.
That he's allergic to.
Yeah. And that's what everyone just takes, except he tends to be, allergic to it.
There still should be some version of LASIK that they should do.
You'd think.
But we didn't have, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my favorite part part of that sequence is seeing him outthink Khan, and Khan has the upper hand, but then when they shut down their shields and Khan's freaking out, you see the nice yin yang between the two guys, which I think is pretty cool.
One little thing I like about this movie is that I feel like there's an effortless balance between the bridge crew. I think that a lot of Star Trek movies, you can tell that they're laboring for we got to get Uhura something to do. Let's have her do this weird dance over here and distract the people. Or oh god, we haven't had Sulu do anything, so let's have him beat up this guard or whatever. And I think this movie just achieves a very effortless balance of everyone has something to do. Uhura has to deal with constant communications problems, and Sulu has to do some ace flying, and Chekov has fire controls that he has to deal with, and there's a lot of great effortless stuff with the bridge crew to do that a lot of the movies just seem to always have problems. They had to invent weird things for them.
Well, it helped that Chekov was on the other ship and he got to have that scene with Khan. He got to have all that front-loaded stuff separately.
Yeah, but then I also like at the end where he comes and kind of sheepishly and is like, do you need any help? He puts them on weapons basically, which I thought was really great.
I guess we're getting to when they beam down, right?
Yes.
Down to the station, even follow them down into the cavern.
Yeah, I always love the moment where Carol Marcus, where David is like, don't you see, he murdered those people and came down here, and Carol Marcus just goes, of course he didn't. I always love that moment of just even though they don't work together, or they're not together anymore, she was close enough to him to know, there is just no way that this guy would ever be that violent and terrible.
Right.
I've always loved that little bit. And again, it helps move the story along.
Yes.
Let's
rather than let's waste time with accusations.
Let's waste time, which I think the last movie would sort of belabor these kind of drama between characters a little bit too long. And I like how it's just you have this quick little conflict, little fight between the father and the son, which, by the way, I do sort of think they could have. It would have been fun just now that I've seen the original series and seen all the classic Kirk moves. I kind of sort of wish that they would have had David do one of those classic TV trademark moves to Kirk, and then Kirk blocks it.
Yeah,
and then David was to do another a flying sidekick, and Kirk blocks it in a moment where Kirk is like, holy crap, how does he know all this? Would have been just it would have been so dumb. But the part of me now, the fan fiction lover would have loved to see,
No, I get it. But even the scene as it is great, just from how he in that moment he realizes this is his son, and he's basically just beat up his son.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, super good.
Which, by the way, I have to say the beam away jackets are amazing.
Oh yeah, the cool collars, the cool big collars, flip collars.
Big. Yeah.
Because it's the one you see on the poster around the con is Kirk's cool big.
The collar, the big pockets.
Collar. Yeah.
I always love cool beam away jackets. And I know there's a history of that going back to the Cage, so I was just going to say these are pretty cool away team jackets.
Yeah.
So the other thing about Kirk meeting David, and this is my friend Wayne and I have this kind of on-running joke about the USS Convenient Relationships, which is a ship that follows the Enterprise in any series that has all the crew's family members when they need them for an episode. So you got... I feel like the fans were very ready and willing to accept this character that is Kirk's son that is just suddenly introduced in this movie. And yet there seems like there was a lot more resistance in the fan base to Saavik being introduced as Spock's brother in the fifth movie. Bad movie as it was, there's still introducing a close family member. Oh, we never heard of this guy. Well, we never heard of David either. But
I think that there's interesting. But I do think that this movie does a very good job of explaining that. I did what you wanted. I stayed away. The idea that specifically. Carol wanted Carol, and I think Kirk probably agreed that the life that Kirk leads is too dangerous and probably not good for him, and that'd be better if he stayed with his mother. I think the movie does a much better job of kind of explaining that. Also, I mean, Kirk is gallivanting around the universe with all sorts of chicks and having all, and so to me it seems like, this is, he probably has a bunch of kids running around, that we haven't heard about, and this is just one of them.
It's another reflection of age catching up to him. He has this, what is it he even says? There's a guy out there I haven't seen in 15 years who wants to kill me. You have a son out there who'd like to join him, it's and I feel old, and I'm like, well, of course, this is just, it's adding to the theme of age and feeling old, and yes, one of Kirk's conquests coming back to say, hey, here's this kid, even though it's not like he abandoned her, he did what she wanted, so he's off the hook, kind of.
Remind me, when does David know that Kirk is his father? I know there's a kind of a thing at the end where they accept it, but when was he told? Did it happen off screen?
It must have happened off screen with his mom. His mom at some point must have just told him.
Yeah, because I was wondering if I missed it when I was watching it again recently.
Yeah, I don't think there's an actual... Yeah, I think either he puts it together or his mom must tell him at some point, I assume. Probably after Spock dies, I would imagine.
Yeah,
so they find Chekov and Captain Terrell.
Oh, yeah.
And, they get fed the misinformation. They go down to the cavern part that Starfleet did, so we think it's a little whatever, fake cave or something, but not even a cave. And we do get the face-off where Khan beats up Genesis and that great... again, it's almost a Die Hard moment where they're having this little standoff over the communicators, and we have Chekov and Terrell not wanting to kill anyone, happy to still let Genesis go.
Yep.
But in order to fight their programming, Terrell kills himself, which also freaked me out as a kid.
That scene is pretty intense too, and the fact that he the effect looks really good.
Of
him disappearing completely. Wigged me out.
That was intense stuff.
Crazy.
But this is where I get bugged by the fact that just because he kills himself suddenly for then almost no reason, the little thing in Chekov's ear screams, and then it just leaves his ear, and I'm like, wait,
so funnily enough, my wife and I, we were watching this just today, and we came across that scene, and I brought up the same point. She had a good explanation. She also loves Star Trek, and at least the original Star Trek series and movies, and her thought was that they're fighting it, and when they do, the creatures make their little... They screech a bit. And in fact, when you watch it again, Terrell has the same thing.
Yeah.
He has a screech.
No, I remember that.
But then he decides to kill himself. Yeah. And then we hear the same thing coming out of Chekov, but then with Chekov, he just kind of passes out and it crawls out of his ear. My theory is they're fighting it, and if you fight it enough, the creatures will evacuate. But, they don't know this. And Terrell, and you kind of have to dig through that pain in a way. You know what I mean? Like, you literally have to get yourself to so much pain that you black out, and then the creature will scurry out of your ear. And Captain Terrell, right?
Yeah.
He kind of, the pain was so much that he shoots himself just to put himself out of his own misery. And then Chekov is trying to fight it. And he's able to fight it a little bit more because maybe he's friends with Kirk. You know what I mean? He has a prior history with him a little bit more. And that's why he ends up passing out and he crawls out. Not perfect, but that's my justification for it. I think it basically works. The sound effects and the way that the sound effects work of the screeching of the ears make that, support that for me enough where I can watch it and not really particularly bugged by it.
My completely made up Eric explanation for this.
I love how we all have fan theories. All right, Eric.
Is that these creatures are psychically connected, and the little one just picked up that its sibling had just died or went away suddenly, and it was afraid for its own life, and so it evacuated Chekov.
I actually like that better. I like that better.
All right. Yeah. Either way, they could both work.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
But obviously that was a stupid idea because the thing gets vaporized the second it's on the floor. So.
yeah, but it wouldn't know that. It would just kind of, think where we are right now is dangerous, therefore I must leave.
Yeah.
So, as an animal, you would think that. So, yeah, either way, Bob, there you go.
All right.
Pick your explanation that you like.
So as much as I love that how intense that scene is, and then afterwards there's a nice little bit I actually caught this time I missed is when McCoy is checking on Chekov afterwards, he's laying on like the space blanket in the background. There's a nice bit where when I think David goes off to have a little moment with his mom, but in the background you see him call over Kirk, and you actually hear Kirk say, "Oh, Pavel." He actually calls him by his first name.
Yeah.
I thought that was a nice little moment.
Yeah,
very much so.
All right, but then then you get to the cave and all that stuff about
the
Kirk.
famous Khan moment.
Oh my God, the bit on the communicator when Khan is ordering them to kill him and he can't do it, and then just the rage Kirk has at this point. Yeah. God, like a poor marksman, you keep missing the target.
yeah. There's a couple moments where Shatnerisms have come through, and that's one of them, and I'm really glad it did
because it plays great.
It plays so good, and then the fact that the theatricality of Montalban. I want to continue hurting you.
Yep.
It's just so great. I love that. This classic moment, and yet another moment where Into Darkness tried to do the same thing, and it's just like screaming with Khan doesn't work at all, and in this movie it's so good.
There's a neat bit he even does before the big Khan moment where when he first is telling him like, Khan, you bloodsucker,
Khan, you bloodsucker.
And you see Montalban having this weird look on his face. It's like total shock that like what's going on, like he's still alive and my guys are gone. Like he's trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And all he can say is, Kirk, my old friend, you're still here. And he's like, yeah, old friend.
Friend.
But it's such a weird. But
I love it because it adds to the idea that Khan would rather have this happen than just have my mind controlled cronies killed him. Mm-hmm. He was probably accepting of that, but the idea that it's almost like I always read that moment where you see Montalban's eyes kind of like realizing of also sort of relish a little bit of relishing that. Oh, this is an even better solution to... This is an even better payback to what I can do to him. Leaving him marooned just like I did him.
Yeah.
And I've always loved that that moment. To me, that's what's going on in Montalban's head.
Sure.
Which totally works.
Because it takes him a minute to even remember to beam up Genesis. He's like, so like...
Yeah, that's right. It takes him a bit, doesn't it? Yeah.
He's not just like, oh, beam that up first. Well, I think this... I like the performance. Right. I like how...
He's absolutely consumed with rage. That was the other little bit. Nicholas Meyer gave when I was talking earlier about Montalban was just having difficulty getting back to the character. Montalban gave him a copy of Moby Dick and told him, read this. You're kind of like Ahab, and that is sort of this man who's consumed by rage. Kirk is his white whale.
Yeah. And that's why
that
it's quoting
other,
Moby Dick.
Right. And that's the other reason why I think Montalban's performance works so well is that he had that, he used Ahab as sort of a inspiration for his performance. And I think it works so good. And that scene really bears it out.
Yeah.
And also the fact that throughout shooting, they never were in the same room together, is my understanding. From reading Montalban, I've also read Meyer's book, is that they were all separate. So they're reading off of just some random PA.
I know.
Saying, Khan, you bloodsucker, blah, 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 blah. And yet they're both able to perform so well, and it cuts together so well, is, I think, a testament to these actors who I don't think get a lot of credit as good actors. I think these two guys are so good. For these parts at least. For at least these parts in these movies, they're both so good. And all that kind of preparation, I think, really bore out on film.
I have a question for you, Eric, then. So I know out of all the TOS characters, Kirk is your least favorite.
Oh, yeah.
What?
Yeah, I know. We'll get to this.
Least favorite of all the characters in TOS, the least favorite.
Yeah. We'll get into this in a second. I just want to get to my point.
Okay.
So I know you got your issues with Kirk. Do you find that this movie has made Kirk at all more relatable for you now that it's covering his age, this son, how he's dealing with Khan? I think he's a much more human character.
Very much so
in this movie. Does this help you at all with Captain Kirk?
Yeah.
Okay, so number one, that's a really, 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 really great question because it ties into something else that I've kind of been thinking about in the back of my mind, and that kind of ties into the scene in the cave is Kirk doesn't believe in no-win scenarios. Right. I can see where some people see that as a good thing. I can see where that can be seen as a negative. The no-win scenario is about the death of the self, and I don't feel like Kirk really grew or developed at all in this story. So I would say no. I don't feel better about him after this.
That is amazing. I am shocked because wow. So wow. I need a minute.
Here's the deal. Kirk is so egotistical and narcissistic and self-centered that you can tear everything away from him. You can kill Spock. You can take away his Enterprise. You can kill his son. You could blow up the entire universe, and he'll whine and moan, and he won't develop as a person at all. It's not until he actually does something genuinely self-sacrificial, whether it's portrayed well or not in Generations, that when he does in fact die, that he lives up to the hero's calling, right?
I don't know. I would argue that Star Trek 3, and we'll get into this next, but I think Star Trek 3 is all about him giving up everything to save his friend. Like, he gives up everything knowingly, you know what I mean? He completely gives up the most important thing, which is being in Starfleet, being a captain or admiral in Starfleet. He gives it all up for his friend, and I think that he does that, and he does that because of the hell he's kind of put through here. I get what you're saying at some points in a way by Star Trek V. Like, in other words, if you were to skip from end of the series and go straight to, let's say, Star Trek V, he's the same guy. Is that what you mean? Like he's pretty much the same person. Like, he's good old Kirk with the glimmer in his eye, and you kind of think that after you would appreciate more if after this, let's say, death of Spock or something, he's a completely different character. Is that kind of what you mean?
And we did get some of that at the beginning of Star Trek 3, where he's talking about, it feels like it's worse than an empty house. It's part of me is, so there you do see that he is dealing with some loss, but even that's not necessarily evidence of a shift in his character. He's just sad that he's lost. I don't want to diminish their relationship, but it's a possession that he no longer has. So it's still like a childish attachment to something that he's dealing with.
Wow.
You taking your minute, Bob, and
he might be sad, but has he fundamentally changed?
Well, here's
that's what I'm looking for Kirk, and I have not seen it.
Hang on
yet necessarily with him.
Hang on, Eric. Hang on. One. Being a hero does not necessarily mean you are ready to kill yourself. Self-sacrifice by literal death is not the only criteria I think that we should be judging whether he's living up to his standard here. I mean, how many times, because I know you love Spock and you certainly have more respect for Scotty, and I don't see you holding them up to that level.
I don't feel like the story at any point ever expects us to. And maybe they don't for Kirk, but it seems like the fan base around Star Trek seems to see these. And I would actually my position is the opposite of that. A willingness to die or sacrifice yourself for something that's greater than yourself is the definition of hero. You'd never see Kirk doing that. Everyone else around him is dying all the time, and he just keeps getting by.
I don't know, but he's always willing, I feel like, on away missions to be the guy leading the charge and do the most dangerous thing. And even like Doomsday Machine, he leaves. He's the one who's going to be in that, in the other ship, and whatever.
Sure.
And
he risks himself all the time.
Yeah.
And I think he's well aware in the back of his mind that in any of these scenarios he could die. I mean, that's not his ultimate goal. Yes, he wanted to get beamed out.
And also in this movie, he's like, the minute that Khan shows his face, he's like, Khan, it's me you want. I'd gladly give myself for your crew. So I don't, even in this movie, I don't think he's necessarily there. I think he's always been that kind of classic hero.
Yeah.
I do understand your point in that he doesn't seem to be massively different by, especially by like the start of Star Trek V. He's kind of like good old Kirk. But I don't know. I kind of think that's sort of that's kind of where he is, and I don't know. It's never really bothered me because to a certain point, I don't want Kirk to change. I think that his character works so well that even from a financial perspective, if you're Paramount, you don't want to screw around with something that works so well and everyone loves.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm thinking about it in terms of like, I mean, granted, Spock comes back. So that's that. But let's factor in, he loses the Enterprise, and then again, that comes back. But he loses his real Enterprise, the legit Enterprise.
Sure.
And he does lose his son, who that impacts you, but that's also a son he never really raised or got to know.
Yeah, true.
So there's these checks and balances with these losses. And it means something.
Yeah.
If Spock had stayed dead, that's a whole different argument.
That's a good point, too, because in a way they did sort of return. By the beginning, I didn't think about this, but you're right. Beginning of Star Trek V, you have undone pretty much the
majority of that loss.
Yeah, they're back in an Enterprise.
Spock is
back and back to himself.
Yes.
And in a way, they have kind of magically returned to that point. And in a way, when you look at a hero's journey, it is circular. So in a way, I look at the whole trilogy of 2, 3, 4 as being in a way, those 3 movies are the hero's journey, and he returns back to his kind of normal self with maybe, at most, a different view of the world. And in fact, in Star Trek V, he does say, you know, I had a brother once and I lost him, and you know, I know what's important. So to me, we get enough of that where that's never really bothered me. And plus, I just love Kirk. Like I do love Kirk. Granted, I am more of a Spock guy. Probably, I wish I was more like Kirk. but in the same way, I love Kirk. You know, and I love seeing the more human side of him that comes out, and that to me is enough to make the whole adventure worth it. Yeah, and to me, I think of real grief too when I think of friends of mine that have passed away, and I think, yes, that impacted me very hard at the time, and now in both cases it's been over 5 years, and there's times that that still hits me, it still impacts me. There's other times where I'm just living my life, and I can now focus on other things. And especially if you were like an admiral of Starfleet, you'd have lots of distractions. So I think it's one of those things where even if we go with the theory of Spock is still dead, or David, it really impacted him more than we're saying, you're only going to see that here and there. You can't see him as mopey Kirk for a whole movie. Yeah, that would be brutal. You know? I mean... Maybe you would like that, but I don't know. I don't know. I think these are slightly unrealistic expectations to put on Kirk to make him better when... Star Trek V, the final moping. God, just wandering through a desert, searching, doing yoga and searching his soul. I don't know. I don't know if I wanted to see. Because I feel like this movie and the next one are the most. I mean, in terms of what I know Eric likes, is the most human and relatable Kirk gets. Yes. And if this hasn't helped Eric at all, then I'm like, maybe 6 too. Maybe 6. Maybe 6. Maybe there. He does love 6, but I don't know if it's for that reason. Yeah. Anyway. I thought I would ask. I was hoping at least you would kind of go, okay, in this one movie, Kirk's okay. Such a disappointment, Eric. So you're...
I'm so sorry.
But is McCoy any better because he served him Romulan ale? Like, wait, you don't like McCoy? He's a little harsh on McCoy too. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because when I first started watching the series, I was certain I was going to find McCoy my favorite character because I'm... Okay. Definitely, if we're going to do like ego, id, super ego, whatever, I'm definitely more someone who leans on emotion or responding or reacting emotionally. Okay. But and so I was like, okay, if McCoy represents the emotion, then great. But you don't ever really see McCoy come up with like a great plan or alternative. He just complains all the time, and it's so frustrating because like emotions are great. Emotions lead to heroic moments and great moments and moments of unifying things and bringing things together and creativity, and like emotion is it builds, and like at no point does McCoy really get a chance to do that. He's just kind of bitching all the time. Whereas Spock, even though he's supposed to be kind of represent, you know, reason and logic, as you said, there's this profoundly deep emotion that is just beneath the surface of Nimoy's performance, and you can't help but love Spock because he's just great, kind of in all ways. Yeah, he's logical and operates out of reason, but at the same time, all of that stuff is informed by a deep emotion. And yeah, he struggles to not show emotion, but his emotions are there, and he's feeling them. And I've told Bob, I'm like, I think Spock would make a fantastic captain. I would serve on Spock's ship any day. I would never serve on Kirk's ship. And fair enough. And even here in this movie, you get Captain Spock, who like fearlessly relieves command of his ship to Kirk because he knows it's the right thing to do, and then at the end sacrifices himself to save the crew without even telling anyone that he's going to go do it. I mean, there's heroism for you. I mean, Spock is, oh God, miles above Kirk in terms of greatness. Okay, so in other words, you like the idea of McCoy, of emotion. Emotion is an important part of the human experience, but you kind of feel like throughout the series and the movies, they never really posit that in a way that is positive. Is that kind of what I mean? He's just kind of a grumpy old man comic relief, which I enjoy. But it's sad that
there are moments with McCoy he likes.
Okay, I understand that. I mean, I want to say there's a couple episodes where that isn't the case, but I would have to think about it hard. But I see your point. That is an interesting view on that.
I probably didn't answer your question here. I don't dislike McCoy. I like McCoy. I do dislike Kirk. I just was not as big a fan of McCoy as I thought I would have been when I first started the series.
Interesting. Okay.
Scotty's his number 2. It's Spock, then Scotty, and then
Scotty is amazing.
Yeah, he loves Scotty.
Fair enough.
But yeah, and the fact, what is it like? The main thing you like about Kirk is really it's more just a relationship between him and Spock and McCoy. But it's like you like the friendship, you like seeing them play off each other. But individually, you'd much rather you'd put Kirk in a closet and you'd go hang with Spock.
Right, and I get. And I get time and time again, and we've seen it in the movies that we've watched so far, and even in the series. It's Kirk's his action oriented nature that gets things done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the world is saved time and again because Kirk made a decision that no one else was really ready to make.
Okay.
So I should say that I recognize that and appreciate that and understand that that's not everyone has that leadership skill like that it's few and far in between that you find someone with that capability. So I mean, I recognize Kirk's contribution, certainly.
It's sort of like this. We all like the Oreo stuffing better than the cookie, but it's not as good of a cookie if you just have the stuffing. You kind of
I disagree.
Maybe that's a bad analogy, but the point is,
at least as a kid, I would have disagreed.
As a point
Oops,
is,
all crunch berries is better than crunch berries.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, okay.
But the point is, in this case, I think it does, at least from your perspective, Eric. I'm just trying to help you.
Yeah,
it helps Spock to see him play with and against Kirk.
Oh, absolutely.
Spock is a better character because
absolutely.
he has Kirk to kind of look up to and bounce off of and learn from. And okay.
They're dynamic. Three of them: Kirk, Spock, McCoy. I mean, they're fabulous.
Yeah.
Right. They're dynamic in how they play off each other and how they build upon each other and support each other. Absolutely. I'm all there for that.
Yeah. It's a magic that I don't think Star Trek has ever quite captured. Right. Even in the remakes with the J.J. Abrams movies, I think there's just something really special about those three actors, those three parts. There's a certain alchemy that's just lightning in a bottle, and they've never quite gotten there, in my opinion. There's been some great, I love the relationship between, Riker and Picard and all sorts of other things, but man, there's just something about those three guys that gets me through all these movies, even Star Trek V, which I don't love, but there's a lot of those three guys scenes, and I can sit through that any day and be happy as a clam. Back to the movie.
So they see the cave. We get very stunned by how amazing the cave is, and they have food, and he's eating his apple, which they have to reference in Star Trek 09. And I even like Kirk saying, what is it like? I don't like to lose. And I love how they beam up in conversation in mid beam up.
Yeah, that's
that was a little thing they did there. I even like the kind of 80s take on the funky transporter rooms we see in both the station and on the Enterprise.
Sure.
So I thought that was kind of neat. I hate the communicators, by the way. The chunky silver communicator. It feels like it takes a step back from the 60s because it's like bigger and it's this like flat silver.
Right.
They fix it in 3. 3 they look much better.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But in 2 it's like, what communicator is this? It's
right.
It's like the prop guy was just like, Diesel dude.
You like the original series, how they're sleek and small.
They look a little smaller, and you have that cool little gold thing. And then here it's like this huge flat. It looks like the cage communicator, but
does it make the?
It does make the noise, but it's very clunky.
It's very clunky.
Yeah.
Is it possible that these are special long range communicators that maybe, they needed for away missions or something?
Sure, if it helps you, Brad.
There you go.
So they beam back up. Spock has done a coded message. They've repaired the ship somewhat. They're doing a little dance around the planet while they're all kind of licking their wounds. I'm trying to remember is this around the scene or is this earlier where Judson Scott is? I think he's playing the other bodybuilder guy from Space Seed, by the way. But he's basically telling them, hey, we've proven our superior intellect. We have a ship. We can go anywhere. You don't need to
that's
kill
way
Kirk.
in the beginning. That's one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention about that. Yeah. I love that scene because that scene is there to just drive home this point that, revenge is destructive. And the fact that he has everything, but because he needs to kill that white whale, he's willing to give it all up for that. And I've always loved that scene, and I always thought it was really smart. And I've always wished that character was the character that Benedict Cumberbatch would have played in Star Trek Into Darkness.
Oh,
not
right.
Khan.
Yeah,
and they actually even kind of look similar if you squint enough, because that would have been kind of interesting. Like, what if, if we've seen Khan versus Kirk? Who cares? What if it would have been, I can't remember that guy's name. What if it would have been that character versus, who's more careful, who's more conservative, who's a little bit more like, not driven insane by revenge, And I also love at the end how he says, yours is the superior intellect, right before he dies, just as like, you son of a bitch, you did. He could have been home free, man, and you just had to go after that white whale. So this leads us to the second battle sequence in the Mutara Nebula. Which, as we've said, looks gorgeous in the movie and holds up very well. It does seem to kind of come out of nowhere. We've never seen this nebula in any background shot, but it's all right. I'm okay with it. But I like how right away they're going there. I even love the little line where they're trying to figure out what to do because they realize, although we've repaired and they've repaired, they're still gonna outgun us. Right, yeah. So what is it? They say, well, if we go in this nebula, shields will be useless and visual will be useless. Yeah. But, and then what is it? Like, and even Saavik's like, well, what's the point of that? And then Spock goes, sauce for the goose. Sauce for the goose. The odds will be even. Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. And the battle strategy of all that is where it comes away. I think that the final half hour of this movie is absolutely perfect. I don't think you can change a single thing. I think it's amazing. I think this part, it all has been building to this. The theme is building, and this is the payoff. And you're just waiting, and you can't wait to see this mano-to-mano fight. Which, by the way, according to Shatner's book, there was going to be a mano-to-mano fight with Khan. Khan was going to have like this like crazy high-tech magic whip that like the end would turn to like a snake, and then he could press a button and it would turn into like something else that would like attack him, and they were gonna have this big battle that would like would like flay his flesh and everything. And because of time and money and everything, it got dropped pretty early. But that's something that Shatner always wished was there. I personally don't need it, and where the hell would it have fit in? Yeah, I know, that's part of it too. Like, where would that fight have happened? It would have been awkward. I think it's really great that these two guys are never in the same room together. I think it really works wonders. It doesn't need that. It doesn't stick out when you watch it as a weird thing until you think back on it. Yeah, and that's a perfect way. to say, very few movies do you have a protagonist and the antagonist where they're not in the same scene together. Yeah, even Die Hard. Yeah, they eventually meet up, usually at the end, or alternately there's a scene in the middle, like Heat is a good example. Where they try to make sure that they see each other in the same room. And I think it's very unusual to have a movie where the villain and the antagonist aren't in the same room together, and then even more unusual for it to work so well. Yeah, like you don't really miss it. I think a magical whip fight would have been terrible. I'm kind of with you. I don't think it's needed. The mano-a-mano fight is this high-stakes fight with the entire bridge and their entire crews, and the fate of the universe because of Genesis. Yeah. Everything is there. It's much more interesting than just two guys walloping on each other. Totally. If Khan had spent the movie developing a device while all this was going on to telepathically control Spock to make Spock whip fight Kirk, that would have worked. That could have worked. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. You're killing me, Eric. This is why I love Captain Kirk. Yeah. We have him going into the nebula. For once, Khan's thinking to go, okay, I love this. Yeah, I'm not going to go in there. Yeah. And then Kirk knows he has to lure him in there, so he baits him with I'm laughing. Khan, superior intellect. Oh, and I'm great. Like, yeah, that's Kirk. Perfect. And that gets him to go in there. And I'm like, Eric, how can you not like Captain Kirk? Yeah, come on. That is a great moment. I absolutely love that moment. Yeah. What do you think, Eric? Yeah, it's a great moment. It's hard to win with this guy. Man. He'll kind of give him the moment. Doesn't help the character. Yeah, it doesn't help the character. God damn. Yeah, right. I mean, anyone who's studied strategy or anything would come up with that. I mean, I know I'm moving the goalpost here, but totally moving the goalpost. Any character could have done that, right? Oh man! Because if Scotty had done that sitting in the captain's chair, or Spock had done that, you'd be raving about that moment even more right now. I'm going through the cast list to see who would have been most awesome.
Because I don't think Spock is capable of that move. Scotty would have been. But I don't think Spock would have done that.
And no matter who else would have done it, they couldn't have done it with as much bravado and style as Kirk, is my opinion.
What Brad just said. Yeah.
Well, no. Earlier, Saavik, I forget what Saavik's comment was, but Spock said something along the lines of, at one point, remind me to tell you about the human ego. You remember that line was in there at some point? Mm-hmm. I think Spock might have been able to, or had a better chance of pulling off that line or that move, because even though he doesn't play the game, he knows of the game, right? Like, he knows how to manipulate humans because he understands human emotions. So I think he could have baited Khan, but it would have been an emotionalist strategy, not a.
I don't know how. Look, the whole bait is based on emotion.
Yeah.
Sure. And I don't know. I'm not saying Spock couldn't have thought of a way to get him in there. I'm imagining the scene with him saying exactly what Kirk says, and it doesn't work. He couldn't have done that. It would have had to have been something else. I don't know what that would have been.
We're not going to win with this. Let's just move on. I think.
Sure, I can't believe that. That was my favorite little moment.
No, same here. Bob, I'm with you.
All right.
What it's worth.
God. I agree. All right. So we get the great Nebula fight, and I love those shots from overhead where you're just seeing the ships blind.
Oh, yeah. I feel like we see these cool angles of the ships that we really haven't seen before. Because usually they're kind of head on or whatever. Yeah. And I love seeing the overhead or underneath. I think maybe we see one. Or straight on. Yeah. There's that great shot where the music's kind of scary, and you see the Reliant and the Enterprise, and there's kind of that weird blinking light kind of behind it, and it's backlit, and he kind of comes out. It's just super cinematic. And,
and I love how they're trying to shoot at each other and just missing.
Yeah, and they're just missing and everything. It does make me wonder, why don't they just like look out of a window?
But I don't think that they're still going to get that much vision out of a window. Like, it's not going to let them see that much farther, you know?
There are a couple scenes where I feel like whatever they're seeing, they could have clearly seen before the static clears. I'm guessing that they don't have windows?
No, they do.
But then why didn't they just look out the window?
Well, at least they do by TNG time. Remember transparent aluminum?
Sure. But there are a couple moments, if I were to nitpick, where it's like, why are they looking through there?
I saw it as a window's not going to change anything. A window's not going to give them that much more visual acuity.
Is it the idea that we as an audience, when we see the shots of the outsides of the ships, that we're seeing a little bit clearer than maybe someone who would be in the ship? They just look out and just see fog.
At least in that scene, that was my impression.
Okay, all right. I'll go with that. Fair enough.
I mean, I could imagine, like, if the situation became desperate enough, they'd have people putting on outfits and standing on the hull and, like, reporting in, like.
Don't make it too many evasive maneuvers, because then, the red shirt over here is going to go spinning off into space as they bank sharply.
So they're going to use that hatch we saw in TMP where they come up on the saucer.
Right, yeah. And they come out and they're just like, oh, shit, Captain, he's like 50 feet, aft.
And they have binoculars.
Yeah.
God. So we have the bit where they wound the Enterprise again, and he's pretty much destroyed their bridge, and at this point it's pretty much Khan. He sees his buddy die.
Yep.
As we'd said, and now he's looking all jacked up.
I shall avenge you.
Yep. And then we see him eventually activate the Genesis device, and David's on the bridge to at least indicate, yeah, I know what that is. That's a Genesis device, and very quickly eliminate all problems of, we got to run away. We can't beam over there. We can't stop it.
Yeah.
And we have Khan still quoting, like, no, you can't get away, and he's still quoting Moby Dick at him. By the way, does he now? This is my thing. We know he definitely dies when the ship goes up, right? From performance, is he dying at that moment before the ship goes? It looks like he's like if you would let it linger on him like another 10 seconds, it looks like he was just slipping away.
I think it was.
I wasn't sure.
Oh, interesting. You know what? I've never thought about that. I don't know. What did you think, Eric?
I think much like the Search for Spock, how the Genesis regenerated Spock, I think there's like a 400-mile tall Khan at the center of the Genesis planet right now.
Wait, where? Where is he? Where's this 400 miles?
At the center of Genesis.
like the giant Spock in the Infinite Vulcan TAS episode.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, at the end of Star Trek 3, where we see those big rocks like poking through, those were actually Khan's fingers. Yeah, trying to get out.
Oh my God! And then he busts out the whip.
Right, and then he busts out the whip and really goes to town. Yeah, it's like a bad anime or something. Like,
God!
But I do love that moment where Spock, there's they realize the stakes and that they can't get away, and Spock just kind of has a moment where he kind of looks.
You know, you can tell he's thinking.
You can tell the gears, and he just goes.
Yeah.
He doesn't tell anybody. The way that all these neat pieces in this third act fall into place so perfectly because of all the very careful setup of character and theme and everything in the first two acts. Just the way they just slot perfectly into place and they build and the stakes go up and up until you get to the ultimate ending is just, it's so satisfying to watch and feel.
And Dr. McCoy trying to stop him, classic Spock McCoy, and then he fakes him out and does a
I love it. Yep, the fake out is great too.
Because it's like I love how they judiciously use the nerve pinches in the movie. That it's not kind of willy nilly. They'll just nerve pinch every guard we see. And then we get the insert remember, which you didn't dwell on too much at the time. I didn't dwell on it much when I first saw the movie.
No.
So he goes in there to fix the warp drive. And it looks really nasty in there, what it's doing with this big column of light and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Don't look too closely at the podium, though. It's shaking like a Doctor Who prop.
Oh, the ship's broken.
Yes.
I love you, Brad. But other than that, it's a great bit. And you like seeing the concern. And after they're trying to get away, and you see Khan almost like, okay, I'm going, but I'm taking you with me.
Yeah.
And you almost think he's going to win. They're all like, we're not going to make it. And then, of course, they fix it, they get away, and then of course you have the classic scene with Kirk realizing what's happening.
Yeah, and he looks at the empty chair.
Yeah,
and and the music is that super high violins of and I forgot that Spock has his own theme in this story too, and that plays it high, and then this death scene I think is absolutely perfect. Like I'm literally getting goosebumps thinking about it. Like the way it was written and performed and acted is just flawless, in my opinion. If this would have been, as originally planned, Nimoy's final scene, I would have actually been okay with it. I'm glad we got more Nimoy. But at the time when you thought this might have been it, like that is a send off. You know what I mean? And it works well even if you hadn't seen it. Like it worked well for me when I hadn't seen any other Star Trek. It still works out because of all the setup that this movie did to show their relationship and how much they mean to each other and everything. But it means even more when you then go back and watch the original series and see the characters together and how much years of history they have together. It's just an absolutely monumental scene that's just played so well. And I love how there's the glass in between them. They can't touch each other. Adds this extra layer of tragedy. Like at least they could have hugged them and be like, goodbye buddy, I'm gonna miss you. But the fact that it's there, it's such a gut punch. And one little moment I think is amazing is Nimoy's decision to before he turns and faces Kirk, he kind of stands up and straightens his uniform out.
He does kind of a Picard maneuver,
he does a little Picard maneuver, and before he faces his friend is just like, wow. It just floors me. This scene is just, I think, maybe the best scene that Star Trek has ever had. It's so good.
So let's turn this back over to Eric. Eric, you've seen this is the first time you've seen this in over a decade. You now are armed with years of TOS under you. How does this scene play for you now?
Yeah.
Oh, it had significantly greater impact. Like I was devastated. I was surprised. The tears were rolling. It was definitely a much different experience than any time I've watched this before. His sacrifice and his death were it was hard.
Yeah, and especially if you're a big Spock fan. Did you? Is this the first time that you've seen it since Nimoy's passing? Because I found that when I went back after Nimoy had actually passed and watched this movie, it was even more devastating. It was like, oh my god, he's really
that's
dead.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
I've had the same.
That's
experience.
That's a really great question. I guess I don't really connect the actors to the characters, I think, as much. So, interestingly, no. But I feel like I'd like to watch it again with that in mind and see how I react. Absolutely.
Yeah, super super sad, but well done scene. Yeah, and supposedly Shatner, according to his autobiography, claims that he was the one responsible for a lot of that scene. I'm not quite sure if I believe it, because it's Shatner, but the whole staging of it, like, the scene was written, obviously, but the specific staging, it was him and Nicholas Meyer and Bennett kind of getting in a room together, and Shatner was like, he looked at the floor plan of the set and was like, oh, well, if he was here and I'd be behind the glass and he could do this and I could do that, and he kind of acted out both parts. Supposedly, we have Shatner to thank for part of that. I'm a little skeptical of that, but at the same time, I think the Shatner was pretty underrated as an actor and coming up with physicality. He was a very physical actor, and the physical staging of that scene adds another layer of complexity to it.
So the scene where Spock puts his hand on McCoy and says "Remember," that was that. Did they know what they were going to do with the third movie, or was that just they just threw that in there? What's the story with that?
Because I've read Nicholas Meyer's book. Have you read it, Bob?
Yeah. At the time, it was planned that this was going to be Spock's official. This is it. He's going to die, and Meyer did not want to do any kind of Sherlock Holmes, let's resurrect him kind of thing. Even though the Paramount suits were starting to say, hey, maybe we should just put something in here as a just in case. And
just to clarify. Nimoy was not going to do this movie. He was just not interested.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that they got him on board was, well, we're going to kill you off and give you a death scene.
Yeah.
So in a way, the death scene of Spock is what got Nimoy on board with this movie.
I mean, hell, he almost didn't do one.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
Was it at the time in his career he was concerned with typecasting and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that was part of it.
That was part of it. Really, what was going on is he felt he was owed a lot of money for Star Trek merchandise that he wasn't giving royalties for.
Yeah, that's part
and they actually had to work that out and take care of that before he would do Star Trek 1. So he had that. Once he had that leverage of, you want me in this movie? Well, then you got to finally work out this blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So that was his big sticking point at first, and then by the second movie, he just was like, look, I don't want to keep doing this character.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I am not Spock, as his book was.
But then they lured him in with the death scene.
Yeah, a bit. But basically, the original ending was that, no, he was dead. The things that were added last minute were this. Okay, so basically, they did some preview screenings of the movie, and it played great. Everyone was bawling, and then by the end, everyone left just feeling sad and defeated.
Yeah.
And Harv Bennett kind of noticed that and was like, the producer, and he's like, first of all, I think he wisely surmised that we might want a sequel. And we should have some setups for that. But also, we want to give the audience kind of more of a positive feeling leaving a theater. So the things that he added without the director knowing, I can't remember if the director directed these insert shots or not.
No, he didn't.
But it was kind of done without his permission, which caused a big issue between Nicholas Meyer and the producers. And it's the reason why Nicholas Meyer never came back. Or he didn't come back for the third movie. So he was so upset by this. But basically, without his permission, they shot the Remember clip. They added Nimoy's narration to the ending, and they also added the shots of the torpedo tube lying
on the planet
intact. Those were all added last minute to give the audience a sense of hope, instead of just leaving with despair. In my opinion, absolutely the right call, but I also understand why Nicholas Meyer would be upset. Because, Nicholas Meyer, by the way, he did, he loves doing gut punch stories. Like he did that the day after?
The day after, the nuclear bomb.
The nuclear bomb. I mean, he loves he is not afraid to do that ending of just the big f*** you ending. But I think it was Bennett who kind of realized that this needs to be done, maybe a different way. And that's how we kind of got what we got. So it's kind of a weird mix, but I think it works really well. And I whenever I do watch the movie, I feel simultaneously really sad at the ending. It's kind of Bob, you'll get this. It's the difference between the ending of Honor Majesty's Secret Service and Casino Royale. And Majesty's Secret Service, it ends with this horrible death. Yeah. And then at the end.
The end, credits.
And everyone came out feeling horrible.
Sure. Okay.
Whereas Casino Royale, there's a bad death, but then there's that little bit of a glimmer of the name's Bond, James Bond at the end, and the audience ends up, even though they went to a very sad place, ultimately they kind of end up with a little bit of a thrill and a hopefulness to him. And that's what they did with this movie.
Right, yeah.
I was thinking in the scene, the other bit that occurred to me this time was, so after the uniform bit, which is great, you actually see him bump into the glass as if he couldn't see it. And it actually had me wondering, this is interesting, I never thought about this, but what if Spock really couldn't see him? What if Spock was so messed up that he's just having to fake like, you know, he knows approximately where he is. He can hear him, but, you know.
Wow. It's too bad Nimoy wasn't alive to ask him that question somehow or to get an answer, because that's a whole another read to that scene. Next time I watch it, I'll have to look at that in mind. Like, is he pretending that he can see or not? I mean, I've always thought of it's like, you know, when you're kind of going into shock.
Yeah.
You can't see.
After he says ship out of danger, of course, Kirk says yes, and, you know, you get that bit where he says, I never took the Kobayashi Maru. What do you think of my solution? And that's actually the line that almost gets me now more than anything else, because you're just like, oh, God. You know what I mean? You're just like, Jesus, like, yeah, you kind of won, buddy, but geez, man.
And Kirstie Alley crying. What do we think about that moment?
Yeah, what do you think about Vulcan's crying there, Eric?
I thought I remember reading that it was cut out of the film, but that Saavik was half human as well, but that she had embraced her human
You are correct.
Half.
That was what it was. Yeah, it was cut out of the movie. They shot it, I believe, but it's not in the director's cut.
Yes.
So as it stands, I've always looked at it like, you know, Vulcans always have very deep emotions, and this is like her mentor, and it's just literally the emotions are so strong that it's getting the better of her.
Yeah, and she's still young. She's not.
Right. She hasn't taken the culinar. You know, so maybe that's part of it. But I know I always thought it was a nice moment.
I never had a problem with it.
Yeah, I never had it. I know there are some fans that do. That's why I wanted to mention it. Yeah.
All right, Eric. Here's how cold are you about Captain Kirk moment? What did you think of him with the eulogy where he literally cracks, saying, of all my friends, or of all the souls I've encountered, his was the most human, and he can't quite hold it together in that line. It's so good.
I love it.
Yeah, that's an incredible thing to say about Spock. That's all Spock right there. That's a Spock moment.
I'm frustrated.
I'm sorry.
Spun it around about Spock. It's
spun it around. It's always about him.
And I'm trying to say, how can you
not like Kirk in that moment?
Kirk is being so human in that moment. Come on.
Yeah.
Crediting William Shatner. William Shatner gave a great eulogy for Spock.
God,
jeez, cannot win with it.
No, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. Yes, I mean, what are we talking about here? I mean, if we're talking about Kirk's love for Spock and their fellowship and the brotherhood and camaraderie that they feel, I mean, of course, it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful scene.
Yeah.
But and this does lead right into the next scene where David confronts him and I think what was more the point of Kirk is when the next scene, he's in his room, it's dark, he's picking up his book, he tries to put on his glasses, but now one of the frames is broken.
Yeah.
Right? There you go. Those glasses, those old glasses, you know, I feel old as a symbol of the movie. There are those glasses which symbolized age and him feeling old. And not only that, they're broken. Kirk is not only old, but he is now broken. And symbolized with this moment.
Interesting.
And you have David, you know, actually admitting, I'm proud to be your son, when before he was ready to punch his guts out.
Kind of have the awkward dad hug.
But they point out, I listened to the commentary on this recently, that it's almost like Kirk needs to be like cradled. And it's, you know what I mean, it's not even like a father-son hug, it's almost like a hold me together hug that's kind of going on with the two of them. There's another interesting thing to mention, how the glasses being broken represent how, in many ways, a lot of, like, you know, literature and mythological characters, in order to gain true insight into life, have to lose their literal vision. And
okay.
That was like a little theme he kind of put in there that was meant to kind of indicate that.
Okay. That's neat. Yeah.
If they could have left Spock dead, right? Then I think Kirk could have had, not that he didn't, I don't want to be so harsh, but for a genuine growing moment, he's been through something that he can't fix and he can't save and he can't do anything about, and he has no choice but to surrender to it and move on and grow from it. If they would have left Spock dead, that would have been a great opportunity for his character, I think.
Okay. And in theory, they might have done that, because I think it's possible that Nimoy wouldn't have returned, and they probably could have made movies more. I'm sure they would have brought in another Saavik would probably have been promoted to science officer. I mean that's probably what they would have done because you need to have that kind of character there. But it wouldn't have worked as well. But that is an interesting thought, like the idea that there's this alternate universe of Star Trek movies where Spock remained dead and Nimoy didn't want to return, and maybe that would have changed Kirk elementally, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, I think we can all agree that if they'd let Spock stay dead, this certainly would have been a fine exit for the character in Nimoy.
Absolutely.
I don't think there would have been any major complaints.
I think I personally think they were kind of clever in that they were able to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah, because usually it can feel really cheap,
which is amazing. But we'll get into Star Trek 3 next.
But I think it's because the resurrection feels really earned.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think that the resolution for 3 is so earned, and it's not pat, and it's not done quickly. It costs them such a high price to get there that it works.
Yeah.
But
So you get the final bit on the bridge where we obviously the tube has been shot to the Genesis planet, and they're just kind of having everybody's there kind of having like a wistful moment.
Yeah, looking at the new planet, right?
And we even have what is the line Kirk says where I think he's even quoting
he's quoting Tale of Two Cities,
and
it's
they say what's that, and he's like, it's something Spock was trying to tell me on my birthday, and I kind of only got it now. And finally McCoy is like, you okay, how do you feel, Jim? And Jim, Kirk says, I feel young, which is a nice yang to everything. It's just a fucking great movie, man.
So Eric, I'm very curious, so after how are your thoughts on this movie now versus a
decade or so ago?
I certainly appreciate what's going on in this film a lot more. It's interesting, like even myself, aging now in my 40s, I kind of get this sense of time is passing and I'm not like a kid anymore, and so even that theme now kind of starts to make sense to me. I just have this incredible admiration for Spock, and so all of the Spock's moments in this film I just thought were really great. It was tough in the motion picture, because he shows up halfway through the film and he's like totally like kind of acting like a jerk, and that so that was I wasn't as excited then, whereas in this film he was like, his character was just perfect.
Every character I feel like is kind of a return to form. I feel like that's what this movie was. It was a return to form.
I believe one of the famous reviews of the time was right out of the gate. Some reviewer said, "Now that's more like it."
It was Ebert.
Oh, perfect.
I think it was Ebert. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, after that Star Trek motion picture, yes, this is Star Trek.
But I'm just curious. Before, what was your ranking out of 10, and now where would you put it?
Oh, sure. I would say previously my ranking probably would have been maybe 7.
Oh, 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And now I think I probably either an 8.75 or a 9. I think at this point. Yeah.
Solid. Very good. Yep. Very cool. Okay. And then, for me, it's always been a 10. I've never. I think since the first time I saw it, it's a 10. It's always been a 10. It's just one of those movies. It's one of my top 10 movies of all time. I just always come back. It's the one that started my love affair at Star Trek. It just works so well, and it continues to work well, and it's one of those movies that I don't think I'll ever get tired of watching. You know what I mean? Every time I watch it, I'm like, I'm gonna get bored, and I never am. I always pick up some little things. One thing that the last time that really struck me was just how simple the directing was. If you really look at how it's directed, and it's mostly wide shots, very few close-ups, mostly very wides. Meyer likes to just kind of let the scene be wide and play out and not cut very often, and if he does, it's to a medium. You very rarely get close-ups. It's almost like a stage play, directed like a stage play, and it just lets the actors breathe, and the moments breathe, and the script breathe, and it's just a great example of a well-done story with actors who are on point in their, I think, kind of in their prime as far as talent goes, at least. And a director who could just bear that all out, and a producer who knew how to make the money work, and it's just this perfect alchemy of all of those, and a fantastic, hungry James Horner score, and it's just everything just fit together perfectly. And I think it's just kind of like Goldfinger for the Bond movies. It's the one that everyone's always trying to chase and remake. Nemesis was a blatant reattempt to try to be like this. Obviously, Into Darkness was, but they're never going to make it. This is just a classic. It's an all-time great. And in my opinion, I would even go so far as saying I don't think Star Trek. This is the best 2 hours of Star Trek ever. Like I love the shows. I don't think they've ever made as good of Star Trek 2 hour anything as this. I think it nailed it.
You can go higher than 10 if you like. I've gone up to like 11 or 12 on
it would hit it. It would hit it. You can't get better than this. It's by far my favorite Star Trek movie. Yeah. Anyways, that's my gushing. Where you at, Bob?
This is it's an easy 10 for me too, even though we have our little niggles, but this is where it gets into, do these little things in detract from your enjoyment from the movie? They don't at all.
No, they don't. Yeah.
And that shows you, I think, that just the power of, as you say, all the elements coming together to create the perfect storm. And for me, the key is every time I rewatch it, it's one of those great movies from my childhood that holds up.
Yeah.
And it legitimately holds up. Like,
does.
You don't have to apologize for it anywhere, except for maybe the effects of somebody who hates old effects, maybe. But like, the thing I always marvel at is mainly the performances and the script. It's a page turner. It moves, the pace, the themes. Nothing feels wasted. Everything feels on character, on point, with a good theme and really good little memorable bits of heck, that turbo lift scene where
Saavik comes in. Change your hair?
She changed her hair, and I haven't done
all in one shot.
All in one shot.
Yeah. Great stuff.
That was who's been holding up the damn elevator? It's great. Oh yeah, you doctor of all people should know about the danger of reopening old wounds.
Yeah, I love it.
Just so many good lines, so many good. I really admire the dialogue and the writing.
Yeah,
it's so good, as you say. Nothing's wasted. It's a good economy of storytelling.
The whole movie was economy. It's almost like if they had more budget, I wonder if the movie would have been worse.
Maybe
because you would have had the whip fight with Khan. You know what I mean? If they had more money.
Interesting.
And it's almost like putting those constraints on the story and the budget. In this case, at least, I think worked to its advantage. It forced them into this tight box. It forced them to keep tight. Whereas, I don't know, Star Trek Into Darkness had $200 million, $250 million, and they just throw all sorts of pew 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 pew, it's the opposite of this. It feels over bloated and overrun and not very focused. And it's trying to do everything, and this is just like, we're gonna really focus on what really matters and just tell that as well as we can.
As much as I like a number of the other movies, they don't match. Like it's almost like every move was almost done right. Like how can you? I don't think they ever did better than this in the movies. And I could get into certain of my favorites of the shows. Like I could pick two of my favorite shows, and in a way it would kind of equal this, but in a kind of a weirdly different way. Because they're
from original series or from like
in terms of either characters with original series, or heck, I could even pick like my two favorite TNG.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe there's a couple TNG episodes that hit this, and there might have been one or two DS9s that get to this level. But when I was really thinking about it on my way over here, I'm like, I think this is my favorite.
Considering that Eric here would probably put Move Along Home as higher than Star Trek 2 thanks to his favorite ranking system. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick which one I was going to watch now, well, I haven't seen Move Along Home in like 3 years, so where does First Contact rank? Because that was pretty well put together.
Well, interesting you should ask. So we actually did a Star Trek movie marathon years ago. It's on YouTube along with most of our movie marathons. Just check out my YouTube channel, Brad Hansen. You'll see a bunch of movie marathons, and that was one of the first ones we did because we did our Bondathon. I think Star Trek was our second because it's really the movie series that we're into secondly after Bond. And Amazingly, so the way we do our movie marathons, Bob, I don't think you were there on that one. We ranked them all like we do here from 0 to 10, and everyone who's there would just give a rating, and people would come and go. So it's super unscientific. But there was a tie for first place amongst Star Trek: Wrath of Khan and First Contact.
Sure,
was a tie. Now, granted, I used to put them pretty much on the same level, and I still love First Contact. But over time, after watching it again and again and again, and after watching the series, because I watch all the movies of Star Trek first before I watch any of the TV series, I find that Wrath of Khan plays better as a continuation of the TV series, and I feel like First Contact somehow doesn't feel very next gen-y in a way. You know what I mean? Like it's really fun for what it is, but it doesn't. It feels more like an action-y.
They were aiming for a wider audience.
Yeah. Whereas TNG, because TNG was a little more headspacey, morality play stuff. Whereas TOS was a little bit more. You'd have these kind of actiony. There weren't really morality plays, but were actiony kind of things. So I felt it was more of a natural extension, and that kind of bumps it up a little bit to me. And there's little things, there's little plot holes in that in First Contact that I can like pick through.
Sure.
And I really can't. We've been trying, and pretty much there aren't any massive plot holes in this movie. There's little things that we can kind of. Justify.
Little niggly.
There's a couple things in First Contact where you can actually that I think are plot holes, but still a great movie. But if you had to rank them between the two, I'm curious, what would you say, Eric?
Between First Contact and
Wrath of Khan.
Yeah,
that's tough. I could probably. I feel for similar reasons, I'd probably put Wrath of Khan above First Contact.
Yeah. And Bob, I'm assuming you'd probably do the same thing.
God, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, First Contact is fun. It's probably the best of the TNG movies.
Yeah,
but
easily.
It's still not perfect. It's still got some definite issues that would keep it from hitting a 10 in my eyes. But yeah. So no, I hear what you're saying. I'm curious to know how the ranking's going to go out for you now when we get to the end of going through the TOS movies. But I'm still a little hurt. You won't give it a 10 for God's sake.
No, I'll take a 9. I'll take bumping up from a 7 to 9. I think that's great.
All right.
All
right.
I'll take it.
All right. So Eric, tell people about your Instagram.
Star Trek Voyager is terrible on Instagram. Please like and follow.
Awesome.
So by the way, because I haven't chatted with you, Eric, yet, I have now watched all of DS9. So Voyager is the last of the series that I have yet to watch.
Same pretty much with me and Eric.
And your tagline keeps on not making me want to.
Okay, so Brad, tell us again, where can people find you?
My YouTube channel. Check out Brad Hansen, Hansen YouTube. You'll find all sorts of good geeky stuff like the marathons we're talking about, including Bob's Doctor Who marathon is on there, as well as all sorts of fun mashups and viral videos and things of that nature.
And as always, people can find my other podcast, Costume Station Zero, where I talk cosplay and occasionally Doctor Who. All right.
And occasionally Bond.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, with that in mind, we'll be back next week with more Trek talk on Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock.
Spoilers, I think they found him.
Yeah, they probably did. Right here on Trek to Trek.